across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
The problems with free speech in this country, the fact that someone who simply had challenging views for the government anyway and for the establishment on immigration was told that he can no longer coach his child's football team. It is an absolute scandal. This is a former Royal Marine who served our country, banned from working with children after he protested against illegal immigrants. It's an absolute scandal, and I want your views on it. 0344 499 1000. The government itself, its own report, says that the inheritance tax rate is going to hurt family farms. We're going to talk about that on Talk Drive as well. Isabel Oakeshott standing by to talk about all these things, as well as The Undercover Migrant, her new documentary that's going to be out in a couple of days' time. We'll get a preview of all of that. What should be done on the rape gangs inquiry? Well, it's taking far too long to even get terms of reference, a chairman or a woman, and everything else that's needed to get it started to uncover the truth. And now the Conservatives have come up with their own plan for it. Also, taxpayers, you and me, facing a staggering £1 billion bill as the Home Office signs its most lucrative migrant centre deal ever. Yet again, these costs around migration spiralling out of control. Lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Be sure to get your call in to let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note via WhatsApp, less than a minute, please, on 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls and for WhatsApp text messages as well. So much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Let's get started here on Talk Drive. Well, I don't know about you, but I have just been shocked, but also not shocked by this ludicrous story. A former Royal Marine banned from working for children after he protested against illegal migrants. What he said online is absolutely nothing to do with children's safety whatsoever. But spurious safeguarding concerns are being deployed to silence people with patriotic views in what has been called a scandalous abuse of the system. Jamie Michael is his name. He's an Iraq war veteran. He's been barred from coaching his daughter's football team. Now, he's passed all the checks. If you've ever worked with kids, I have. I volunteer with a young man in the care system. I had to pass a DBS check, disclosure and barring system check, to make sure that I'm not dodgy, I've got a criminal record, I'm no threat to children. I passed that. Jamie Michael passed that. There'll be hundreds, thousands of people listening at the moment who've passed those DBS checks as well, who will know all about it, all the hoops you've got to jump through. But here we are, this man from South Wales, 47-year-old father from South Wales, charged with inciting racial hatred after describing migrants as scumbags and psychopaths in a 12-minute video. He was cleared by a jury after 17 minutes, so innocent until proven guilty. He's innocent because he hasn't been proven guilty, but his local safeguarding board, which is responsible by law for protecting vulnerable children, has ruled he is not suitable to work with youngsters, and a child protection concern made against him, he was told, has been substantiated. This is absolute nonsense. Let's get the view of Isabel Oakeshott, who is Talk's international editor. Isabel, great to talk to you today. What do you make of this?
Well, I just find these cases so incredibly depressing. The absolute overreach of these sort of organisations and arms of the state. You know, in the case of the state, I'm talking about what sounds as if it was a completely unnecessary prosecution or attempt to prosecute this guy. From what you said, it was a jury trial. Yep. I'm sure he was he'll be very happy that he had a jury of sensible people.
One of the last people to get one of them for sentences under 3 years.
Well, quite. I mean, I hate to think what would have happened to him had he not had the benefit of that jury system, as David Lamia, Deputy Prime Minister, seems to want to do. So yes, the jury saw sense, but this local group are saying, for some reason, and making a very bizarre leap, 2 plus 2 equals about 18 in their minds, that somehow or other, because he has been dragged through the courts completely unnecessarily, at an enormous cost to the taxpayer and waste in the system, because he's been dragged through the courts, even though he was found not guilty, that somehow makes him unsuitable to work with children. I wonder if they could perhaps show their thinking there. I don't understand.
Yes, indeed. And also, he's been supported by the Free Speech Union. They say they've got 15 people on the books who've been branded a risk to children because of their political views. Now, this is the dossier including teachers reported over comments made in the classroom and staff rooms now facing school bans, as well as a charity worker reported about a row over grooming gangs. Right, so if he's called migrants scumbags and psychopaths, my question is, and you correctly say, show your working safeguarding board, if he thinks migrants are scumbags and psychopaths, what on earth has that got to do with coaching girls' football?
Absolutely nothing. And, you know, the truth is that some migrants are exactly that, and many of them are not. But it's perfectly legitimate to have the view that those who break into our country, and I assume that he was referring to illegal immigrants, are scumbags. That's a perfectly legitimate view. And we can all, because we're on a broadcasting network here and we're responsible, we can all say some migrants are very lovely people, including a small number of illegal immigrants, but they've still broken our law. And there's a complete irony here, isn't there? That someone who comments on people who break the law finds himself dragged through the courts, whereas the actual people who break the law by entering our country are given great hospitality and, you know, warm blankets and cups of hot cocoa and whatever they need for months or years to come.
And on that note about people who break into this country, on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Isabel, you've got a feature-length documentary, never seen before, undercover footage from inside the world's most dangerous migrant camps in Calais, gunfire and nightly reality. Extraordinary new evidence showing French police escorting migrants on public transport all the way from the beaches, doing nothing to stop the migrants. We're going to have a quick look at this, and then Isabel, perhaps you can tell us about it as well. Let's see a clip of Isabel's documentary that's going to be broadcast here on Talk on Wednesday night.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. I needed to get out there quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Isabel, lots of work went into that. Just tell us about how it was put together and what you reveal.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, no British citizen has ever gone undercover in the migrant camps of Dunkirk and Calais. Why not? Because it's extremely dangerous. And how on earth do you, as a British citizen, blend in with these multinational groups? And so it took a very, very brave man, a builder from Rochdale, Christian, to volunteer for this extremely high-risk operation. And it took months of preparation for him to be ready to do this, a lot of talk and contact with people smugglers, and off he went, and he spent 2 weeks living side by side with some very, very dangerous people. Now, I don't want to spoil too much of what's coming up on Wednesday, but suffice to say that there were some very frightening moments, and that sound of gunfire was perhaps one of the most shocking things. That is a routine thing in the camps of Dunkirk. You can hear semi-automatic weapons going off at night. In effect, a swathe of northern France, the stretch of France that is closest to the UK, has become an utterly lawless rogue state. And the French police have effectively ceded control of that strip of France to the gangmasters. And this is what we have on our doorstep. And our expose will show people things they have never seen before about what is really going on in those camps, and crucially, the kind of people coming our way. And if I could just do a little bit of a plot spoiler here, suffice to say, we didn't meet any doctors, we didn't meet any engineers, we didn't meet any women that might work for the NHS.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. The undercover Isabel Oakeshott presents The Undercover Migrant Wednesday 7 o'clock only here on Talk. I wonder, Isabel, whether your sense and whether your lesson essentially from your reporting was what I have always suspected, but you know far better than I do, which is that the French, having ceded control here, are simply saying, just get them out, just send them to Britain. Doesn't matter how much money they give us, doesn't matter that we give them £500 million a year, let them just go to the UK because that gets them out of our hair.
100%. So we've long known that the French police turn a blind eye to this, but what we reveal in this documentary is so much more than that. What we show is the French police actively facilitating the passage of migrants from these camps on long and complex journeys to the departure points for the boats. So it's not just that they're not stopping them boarding the boats, they are accompanying them every step of the way. So my question tonight is, what is our money being used for? Why are hundreds of millions of British taxpayer pounds being sent to the French authorities only for them literally to enable and help those migrants to come to the UK? It is an absolute outrage and we should demand our money back.
Isabel, I'm interested just in one domestic political story as well. These are allegations made by a former Reform UK councillor against Nigel Farage and the amount of money he spent on his election in 2024. Richard Tice, who's the deputy leader of Reform UK, was questioned about this on Jeremy Kyle's Breakfast programme. Let's see what Richard Tice said.
Well, I mean, it's becoming farcical, isn't it, frankly? I mean, 2 weeks ago, it was this twaddle about what he may or may not have said 49 years ago in a completely different era. Last week, they were short news, they tried to rehash the same story on the BBC, and they got quite rightly slapped down for double standards and hypocrisy. And now they're trying something else, it seems to me. I mean, this story, just a couple of things around it. First of all, this is by a disgruntled former councillor who was expelled from the Reform Party for allegedly inappropriate sexual behaviour back in the summer. And surprise, surprise, he's now making all sorts of allegations. Well, that's a surprise.
Is there much in this, do you think, Isabel? Should Reform UK cooperate with the Electoral Commission if there's an investigation? Because, of course, the amount of money spent on elections is very tightly regulated.
Well, Nigel Farage is an incredibly experienced politician and candidate. You know, his enemies love to cite just how many times he ran for Parliament before he managed to be elected. So if anyone, I'm not sure that anyone could be more familiar with the rules and the system than someone who's run for Parliament that many times. So I would be astonished if he had done anything that amounted to breaking the law or bending the rules. I think he would have been immensely careful about all of that. But if we can zoom out for a second, I'm genuinely sort of surprised, I probably shouldn't be, by the absolute relentlessness of the onslaught in the operation.
It's interesting you mention that as well. I think it's just starting. I think there's a concerted campaign for what I call the ABN campaign, the Anyone But Nigel campaign, to stop him becoming Prime Minister of our country. I think that is a very specific thing that is happening at the moment and will continue to happen for the next 3.5 years.
I mean, how do these hostile elements keep up this momentum for another 3 years? I mean, good luck to them. I don't think there can be possibly much left for them to dredge up and turn over and, you know, make a great big song and a dance over. And, you know, if it were anyone other than Nigel, I would begin to worry about how any human being can withstand this level of hostile scrutiny and relentless bombardment. But, you know, I know Nigel Farage. I know that he'll just keep going. And here's the other thing. I can't help thinking that this increasingly desperate campaign is only going to backfire because millions of voters see it for exactly what it is. And I think it may well solidify Reform support, and those people that have led and pushed this stuff are going to be left very disappointed with the outcome.
Isabel, thank you. That's Isabel Oakeshott there, our international editor here at Talk. And don't forget, on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Isabel Oakeshott presents The Undercover Migrant. Wednesday at 7 o'clock, only on Talk. I just want to remind ourselves of what Jamie Michael, the former Royal Marine, said to Ian Collins today a little bit earlier. This is about right-wingers like Jamie Michael branded a danger to children. It's an absolute scandal. This is what he told Ian Collins a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as you know, what's been brought up recently with David Lammy trying to scrap jury trials. I mean, I could have been looking at a lot different situation than I'm in right now. I've been sat in the jail in front of a kind of a leftist judge. And the first two judges that dealt with my case, I feel that they were kind of leaning to the left, and if it was them dealing with it, then I could have been in a different situation. So to be talking about jury trials is very scary and concerning.
James in Staffordshire has given me a ring about this and a couple of other issues as well. James, you're very welcome to the programme. Thank you for ringing 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say this afternoon?
Good evening, Peter.
Hi there.
Firstly, I'd like to say that would they have safeguarding problems with the drag artist in bondage gear talking to 6-year-old children? Would they have the same concerns?
Very good point, well made, James.
And the second one, Peter, I'm a huge fan of you and a huge fan of the radio station.
I sense a however coming, James.
There is a however. I do have a small amount of umbrage to take. You were fairly harsh on the whole Nigel Farage 13-year-old statements that he was making. Now, I want to challenge you. You lived in the Troubles in Northern Ireland, so you never, ever criticised any other child.
Oh, I absolutely did. I absolutely did. I've said all sorts of things when I was 13 that I would not want to be brought up now. I said stupid things as a child. I think I'm not necessarily being critical of Nigel Farage. What I'm saying is there is no circumstance at any stage in the last 5 decades or beyond that where saying Hitler was right or that people should be gassed is acceptable. Now, he absolutely denies that he said those things, and it's a very straightforward he said, she said argument, and to be honest, there's not a huge amount more that can really be said about it. That's essentially my position on it, James.
Good, at least you've owned up to the fact that you were really a quite naughty boy.
Oh, I was very naughty, yes. I was cheeky, I was gobby, and my teacher said, Peter talks far too much in class, he'll never have a career in that.
Yeah, you need to now formally apologise to basically the entire world for your tiny transgressions and
there are many more than tiny. James, listen, thanks for your call. I appreciate it. That's James in Staffordshire. Yes, I think, you know, I'm not sure there are too many people who would want to be pulled up on what they said as a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old or many things that people said in the past, and I think it's perfectly legitimate. I mean, the debate's kind of over now. I mean, it was kind of last week and the week before, but for Nigel Farage to say, well, if the BBC want to attack him, what about all the things that they broadcast at that time, like, for example, the Black and White Minstrel Show? I don't really particularly want to rehearse all this again. I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but if you have views on it, you're more than welcome to give me them 0344 499 1000. We are the home of free speech, and if there are things that we're not talking about today that you think we should be talking about, well, that's fine, because it's my show, but it's your show too. This person says, can't wait to see Isabel's documentary on Talk on Wednesday. It needs to be shown somehow to all the people in the UK who don't watch Talk as well. Very good point. Amanda says, the obsession with Islamophobia by this government is so out of control, it's bordering on a mental illness, as we've seen today with the ex-serviceman's treatment by the authorities. Yeah, that's Jamie Michael, who spoke to Ian a little bit earlier on. Mick in Wallington says, until the people hold the establishment to account for their blatant lies, morality and political corruption, nothing will change. Most MPs would not pass a DBS check. Becca says a DBS check, this is the Disclosure and Barring Services, it's criminal records check, essentially. It used to be called a CRB, Criminal Records Bureau check, now called a DBS check. It's nonsense, says Becca. It only helps if the person has been caught and convicted. I know a few people that have clear DBSs, but I wouldn't allow anywhere near my daughter. Mick says, Ukraine-Russia peace deal. Yeah, certainly Zelensky's been talking to Starmer about that today. We've had the leaders of a few other countries, including France and Germany, there as well. How can anyone trust Starmer when he's been lying to the people since before he became Prime Minister, says Mick. And Kelvin in Macclesfield says, good evening, Peter. The left wing is saying that the right wing is a danger to children. So say to them who is covering up for the grooming gangs, they're the ones sending out the message it's okay to rape women and children, it's okay to kill our children and stab people. What's next? The age of consent for sex reduced to 4 years old? It is sickening. Lock up your kids and stay out of left-wing areas, folks, says Kelvin in Macclesfield. I don't think you can blame everybody with left-wing views for the rape gangs. I think you can blame the people who are part of the rape gangs and the people who enabled them, including, yes, some Labour councils. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the programme, because it is disgraceful that it is taking far, far, far too long for this rape gangs inquiry to get up and running. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Essex Police interviewing Farage, ex-election fraud accuser, and Kemi Badenoch unveiling her inquiry terms of reference. Jack Elsom, political editor of The Sun, coming up in just a second here on Talk. Stay with us.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Terry in Slough has been in touch and says, "Hi Peter, in my opinion, Nigel is the most honest politician in the country." Dallas says, "The mere fact that the government is signing up to this mega migrant accommodation deal only starting in 2028 clearly shows it has no intention of trying to curb the influx of illegal migrants." And Angela says, "Great to have you on Drive, Peter." Thank you, Angela. "The story of the former Royal Marine who has had his life ruined by the left needs to be a warning that no one is safe in Starmer's Britain. It is becoming very, very concerning." Thank you to everybody who's been in touch about a slight echo, apparently, on the clips we're playing. We've got our technical brains behind the scenes working on that, and we'll try and make sure they don't echo the next time we play them out. Let's talk about Nigel Farage now and Essex Police and the fact that there has been a complaint about the allegation that he has spent too much money. You're only allowed to spend a certain amount of money on an election campaign, and there is Essex Police are to interview this accuser. Claims Nigel Farage broke spending rules ahead of the last election. Richard Everett is his name. He's a former Reform UK councillor. He claimed that there are several high-value items missing from the declaration that Mr Farage met on his agent Peter Harris. Let's speak to Jack Elsom, who's political editor of The Sun, about this. Jack, they've certainly come for Nigel Farage in the last 2 or 3 weeks over allegations of things he may or may not have said as a 13-year-old child. What do you make of these latest allegations?
Yeah, good afternoon, Peter. Well, clearly, misreporting, fiddling election expenses is a serious crime, and the fact that the police are even assessing these claims clearly is not helpful for Nigel Farage. But as you said, as he climbs up the polls and we get even closer to elections, we've got elections in May, obviously the general election's not for another 4 years, but this sort of scrutiny is only going to ramp up on the odds on next Prime Minister. And Nigel Farage clearly now is feeling the heat, not just with these Dulwich allegations from dating back to when he was a schoolboy, but now more people coming out of the woodwork and levelling claims at him. I think that it's difficult with Nigel Farage because he almost likes to model himself on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump probably would say that lots of his character flaws are priced in, really, and I guess it's sort of that tussle about whether or not any of this stuff is going to stick to Nigel Farage. This is just the latest in a long line of stuff.
I wonder if we could go back slightly, Jack, to Caerphilly and that by-election for the Welsh Assembly, because what I think we saw there was some sort of coalescing around a kind of anyone but Nigel candidate. The Conservative vote collapsed. It was probably going to anyway. But I think we saw in that by-election at least a bit of people saying, look, it's the Reform UK candidate or someone else. And in that case, it was the Plaid Cymru side of things. I wonder how much else do you think that's going to happen? Perhaps not at the local elections, but maybe more in the general election. And this sort of anyone but Nigel campaigning to really try to stop him becoming Prime Minister.
I'm sure that's right. And Keir Starmer clearly wants to frame the next election as, do you want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister or not? And he is banking on the fact that there are more people than not that will go, actually, you know what, I don't want Nigel Farage to be Prime Minister. And he is hoping, Keir Starmer, that they will therefore flock behind his banner. How that shakes down in every single constituency in the United Kingdom under our first past the post system, remains to be seen. There are lots of people actually that might try and flip it the other way and say anyone but Starmer, and therefore might go for, Nigel Farage if they see him as the best vehicle to get rid of a Labour government. Clearly, the polls show at the moment that Reform voters would vote Tory if that's the best chance of getting Labour out, and Tory voters would vote Reform if it's the best chance of getting Labour out. So clearly, this strategy to unite the Progressives might not be as genius as Keir Starmer thinks it is, but Nigel Farage himself is very alive to the threats of tactical voting. We saw that in Caerphilly, where the big left-wing bloc came behind Plaid Cymru to stop Nigel Farage claiming victory, and the Labour and Tory vote collapsed in the process. I think that Nigel Farage now, he's going to have his work cut out of him just because he's not one of the main two parties. He doesn't have sort of the election-winning pedigree which the other two parties come attached with, and therefore there is going to be a lot of stuff chucked at him over the next 4 years, and it will be a test about whether he can survive it. And what's different about Nigel Farage, I think, to any other leader, some people love it, some people hate it, but he is quite almost rough and ready with the way he responds to these allegations. And whereas previously, if we'd seen politicians mired in scandalous accusations about what they'd said when they were younger, they might come out in a more measured way and try to rebut every accusation as it happens. We obviously saw last week the spectacle of Nigel Farage launching a pretty blistering tirade against the BBC.
Yeah.
Now, how that plays, probably with his supporters, probably very well. How it plays to his detractors, not very well at all. And people came out and said they looked petulant. How it plays with the sort of the wavering majority of people that really don't engage with politics on a day-to-day basis, but pick up the odd thing. Yeah. I guess that remains to be seen at the moment. I think the jury's probably out.
It's a very good point. And Terry and Bansett says the people attacking Nigel Farage forget what happened with Donald Trump. The more he was accused, smeared and abused, the higher his ratings scored with the public, says Terry. I want to ask you about another story. This is Kemi Badenoch unveiling alternative grooming gangs inquiry terms of reference, what she thinks it should do after Labour's been accused of dragging its feet. We spoke to the Jeremy spoke to the Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp about this morning as well. There's clearly so much frustration at the second inquiry, but then of course the Conservatives let the conclusions of the J inquiry, the previous inquiry which touched on this, sit on a shelf and gather dust for 18 months.
Yeah, you're right. And listen, I think clearly two things are happening here. The first is that, yes, of course, politics is at play, and Kemi Badenoch has got good traction out of, using the grooming gangs scandal as a stick to beat the Labour government with. People in Labour would say that she's never been that incensed by it before she became leader of the opposition and saw that there was a chink in Labour's armour to go for it. And the fact that her and Chris Philp came out this morning saying they were being constructive by offering this terms of reference. They're not being constructive, otherwise they would have done it in private. And there's clearly no way the government are ever going to accept their terms of reference. But, and there is a big but, clearly they are getting traction out of it because many people do feel incensed about the way this grooming gangs inquiry has been handled. Let's not forget Keir Starmer had to be dragged kicking and screaming into holding a national inquiry in the first place. And then 6 months ago, I think it was on a trip to Canada, he said that actually he was going to U-turn on that and would commission one. Now, that has been 6 months now. That time has passed, and still we don't even have a chair, a draft terms of reference, or the rest of it. Meanwhile, at least 5 victims have quit the survivors panel in fury about how this is being handled.
And the nonsense that comes out of the government and successive governments, but particularly this one, saying, oh, these things take time, these things take time. When there's the political will, stuff can be done. They recalled Parliament on a Saturday to save British Steel. Stuff can be done incredibly quickly. Being Prime Minister is a position of awesome power, and you can click your fingers and make things happen. And they've decided, or at least not actively made this happen as quickly as they could. Jack, thank you. I appreciate your contribution today. That's Jack Elsom there, who's the political editor of The Sun. Ian has a voice note. He sent it in on Farage's comments. Quite a few people getting in touch about this. Let's hear what Ian has said.
Hi Peter, it's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about Farage, I've read MPs' criminal records will not be disclosed. Now for me, I think that's more important that they are disclosed than raking over something that's 50 years old. And I think as a taxpayer, we have the right to know what our MPs have done historically. And if they have a criminal record, we deserve to know that. And I don't understand how they can get away with hiding and covering it all up. We have a right to know everything.
Ian, I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, and I think if MPs have a criminal record, we should know about that. I'm not talking about parking fines, I'm not talking about, breaking the speed limit, I'm talking about serious things. We should be informed, but the criminal records of ministers can stay secret because disclosing their convictions would be a breach of their privacy, according to the Information Commissioner's Office. They refused to compel the Cabinet Office, which is a sort of central bit of government, to disclose how many ministers had criminal convictions before they took office, ruling their right to privacy was more important than the public being made aware. It accepted the Cabinet's claim that revealing their convictions might create a jigsaw effect which could identify individuals following repeated requests. Well, Ian, I totally agree with you. And what do you think? At home, do you think, or in your car, maybe you're one of the car dwellers heading home this evening at 4:30, do you think that we should know any criminal convictions that our politicians have. I think transparency is a very important thing in politics. So what do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Damon in Wigan, who says, I said a lot of stupid things when I was 13 because I was a child, but I grew up, I served my country in the army. Nigel was 13, he was held to account for what he said because he knew what he was saying. How can Nigel at 13 be held to account, but the ISIS bride was 15, Shamima Begum, and a child not knowing what she is doing? Well, exactly. Very, very good point. And I don't want Shamima Begum anywhere near my country. I must say, I would happily make sure that she never stays here ever again and is never allowed back in. I must say, both as a child and both as an adult, she made horrendous decisions that are completely against the values of this country. And one more from Bargain in Birmingham, who said Shabana Mahmood should watch this documentary that Isabel's done and stop the boats. We should ask for our 500 or 700 million pounds back. This documentary should be sent to Starmer and he needs to address the crisis, but he just ignores it. Why, says Margaret in Birmingham. Lots more to discuss. We'll talk about the £1 billion bill for the most lucrative migrant centre deal ever, and one MP saying don't grant residency to migrants who would be a financial drain. That's Nick Timothy, the Conservative MP. We're hoping to speak to him before the end of the programme, although he's rushing around in Parliament at the moment. Plenty to discuss. I want to hear from you as well on all the topics today. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who's been in touch. We'll get to more calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a minute, but I want to talk about taxpayers, you and me, facing a staggering £1 billion bill as the Home Office is signing its most lucrative migrant centre deal ever. This is just crazy because there are so many ways in which we're spending so much money on a problem which the government says it is solving. But if it is solving it, why do we have to run a 1,000-space Heathrow Immigration Removal Centre from 2028 to 2038? Let's speak to Robert Bates about this from the Centre for Migration Control. He's their Research Director. Robert, just take us through this.
Yeah, so effectively what these removal centres are these are individuals where they're on the cusp of being removed from the country after either having had their asylum appeals rejected or being foreign national offenders. You would think once they're in these removal centres, then it's pretty much a surefire thing that they would no longer be in the country. Unfortunately, only about 50% of those in these removal centres actually end up being removed. These are effectively short-stay accommodation centres where individuals really only there for two to 3 weeks, sometimes slightly longer, pending their removal. And this is part of the reason why it's so ridiculous that costs are spiralling in this latest contract, because they're spiralling.
How have they got so out of control, and how big is this centre? I mean, it's £1 billion. That's crazy. That's that's huge. And the sort of facilities there, as we all know, just need to be pretty basic, especially if the people are only there for a short period of time.
And that's the really heart of the matter. These really should just be rudimental beds and some kitchen facilities to make sure these people are fed before their removal. But the reason why this is exploding so much, and the real reason why we've actually seen the cost of housing individuals in these removal centres increase gradually and then rapidly since 2019, is because we're gold plating the services here. We are providing an endless parade of sort of pastoral care, wellbeing support, arts classes, sort of all singing, all dancing, effectively making this place a kind of retreat for these individuals rather than what it actually should be, which is a really run-of-the-mill, basic detention facility before individuals are removed. And this is part of the problem with the whole asylum and immigration removal system, is we don't use money productively, we don't use it efficiently, and actually, rather than just getting the job done of getting individuals out of the country, we are just tripping over ourselves to bestow on them all these gifts, all these nice things, all these little trinkets. And this is why actually for so long we've seen really unproductive outcomes from immigration enforcement and removals, because we're not spending the money in any way on actually what the purpose of those functions and those detention facilities are, which is to get people out of the country. We're spending them mostly on actually making sure these people have a bit of a whale of a time, to be perfectly honest. It's really, really ridiculous. And this is actually very worrying, because that money could be much better spent, rather than on those arts classes, on actually making sure we have increased capacity in the detention facility estate. We only have about 2,000 beds.
And actually, part of the way that the government is trying to get rid of the backlog is by assessing when these people arrive on our shores illegally. Are they actually asylum seekers? Are they not? The general rate of acceptance, once you go through all the rigmarole, is about 76%, so the vast majority of them are accepted as asylum seekers. We're in a situation now, though, where some of them just have to fill in a form. They're not even interviewed by a real human being, such is the scandal of how big this backlog is, Robert.
Yeah, we've effectively given up any pretense that we're actually judging asylum cases in any significantly scrutinising manner. Actually, a few years ago, the Home Office was already admitting that about 50% of the asylum decisions it was taking were not of very good quality, and there was a lot of room for doubt as to whether they made the right call either way. If we start going down this route of, as is being proposed, effectively just having individuals fill in forms, and we don't know, of course, what support they're getting when it comes to filling in those forms, whether it's left-wing groups or charities that know exactly how to twiddle the system as well, then we're going to end up with an even worse situation. They're saying that they're going to only focus on applicants from those countries where there's already such an astronomically high grant rate that it wouldn't really make any difference. And I think that really is indicative, because it is effectively saying we are just going to continue waving these people through, which is going to blindly believe exactly what they tell us on face value. You talk to any immigration enforcement official, former or past or present, and they will say it's ridiculous to not be able to eye someone up, to read their body language, and to get a real sense of whether they're
and to probe them, to ask them difficult questions, not questions they have had time and space to think about. Ask people direct questions, and they will struggle or learn that what the facts are. I just wonder if you could comment as well on this Telegraph investigation. Asylum seekers being offered free or cut price crossings from northern France if they swallow packets of Class A drugs and deliver them to organised criminal gangs in Britain. I mean, we've known that this has happened for years through airports, where people from various countries swallow them, and then of course they come out the other end, and these drugs are smuggled into the country. Some people die as a result of them if the packets burst and things. But asylum seekers being offered free or cut price crossings. Some of them who agree to smuggle cocaine and heroin are offered VIP crossings, joining women and children on boats that criminals believe attract less suspicion.
Yeah, well, I think it's just a sad indictment of how little we actually vet any individual coming into the country, how few checks they undergo, that this has been seen as a really viable business opportunity by people smuggling and then obviously drug trafficking gangs as well. I mean, the comment in this piece by the Home Office that they don't recognise these claims really is actually the problem here.
Well, it's showing their ignorance, isn't it? I mean, it's bound to happen. It happens through the airports, and they know it happens through the airports. Therefore, why would it not happen through the small boats? It is a logical thing to happen. Robert, thank you very much for your contribution today to Talk Drive. And just a reminder that on Wednesday at 7 o'clock, Talk is going to bring you never seen before undercover footage from inside the world's most dangerous migrant camps in Calais, where gunfire is a nightly reality. We've done some serious undercover reporting here. That is Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel Oakeshott presents The Undercover Migrant. That's Wednesday at 7 o'clock, only on Talk. New evidence showing French police escorting migrants on public transport all the way to the beaches, doing nothing to stop the crossings, laughing at us, laughing at the £500 million we give them every year to try to stop this. Disgraceful. It's going to be fascinating to watch that Wednesday, 7 o'clock, only on Talk. Isabel Oakeshott presents The Undercover Migrant. A bit of breaking news now on Talk, and that is that 2 more people have been arrested following a pepper spray incident at Heathrow Airport. You may remember from my weekend programmes that this happened early on Sunday morning. This was shortly after 8 o'clock. A woman was allegedly robbed of her suitcase in a car park lift in the airport's Terminal 3 building at Heathrow. 31-year-old man arrested on suspicion of robbery and assault close to the scene on Sunday. He was released under investigation while inquiries continue. Now, a 24-year-old man in Lambeth in London has been arrested on suspicion of robbery and assault, and a 23-year-old woman on suspicion of conspiracy to commit robbery. That is the Metropolitan Police saying that the pair remain in custody. If there are any developments on that, we will, of course, bring them to you. Whatever you want to talk about, however you want to talk about it, you let us know. 0344 499 1000. That is the number that Anna has sent us a voice note on. Anna wants to give us her thoughts on being a Reform voter. This is what Anna has to say on her voice note.
Good afternoon, Peter. Anna, sorry. Currently, I don't know anyone that isn't voting for Reform UK, and I don't know anyone that was a Tory voter that for any reason will go back to them. And I speak to about 50 to 70 people a day in all sorts of conversations. Also, I think this has to be faced, and I'm hoping you're grown up enough to face it. Peter, if there was the slightest suggestion of any further leftist or liberal governments, I believe we are looking at a civil war, because I think the country will just snap. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Anna, thanks for that. Really appreciate your voice note. You can send them to 0344 499 1000. I really, really hope we don't get to that side of things. I think there is certainly a possibility, a strong possibility, of a Reform UK government. I also think there's a possibility of Labour staying in government. I think there's a possibility of Labour and the Liberal Democrats doing some sort of deal as well, or maybe Reform UK and the Conservatives doing some sort of deal, although Nigel Farage says that's not something he's interested in and won't happen. It's all a long way away. It's 3.5 years away. We've got at least another 3.5 years of Labour, almost certainly, although Farage thinks there'll be an election in 2028, I think he said previously. It'll be fascinating to see what happens, especially as the vultures are circling around Keir Starmer. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in the programme as well. Plenty to talk about here on other issues as well. In just a second, we'll talk to a turkey farmer. He's busy this time of year because the inheritance tax raid is only going to hurt family farms, according to a report by Labour. I could have told you that some time ago. Stay with us here on Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of there quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes a little bit later. But first of all, I want to talk about the inheritance tax raid. It's going to hurt family farms. This is Labour's own report has found this. I mean, it's hardly a shock. And now finally they're catching up with the rest of us. This is a report commissioned from the former head of the National Farmers Union, Baroness Batters, and she is going to acknowledge the impact of inheritance tax changes on the profitability of farms. Ministers had previously insisted the measures would reduce tax avoidance by investors and not hit most family farms. Any farmer will tell you that Baroness Batters has hit the nail on the head, and that actually charging 20% tax on inherited agricultural assets over £1 million from April 2026 has put pressure on farmers. Let's talk to one of them, Paul Kelly, who is a turkey farmer. Paul, I know your farm has been in the family for 52 years. How has this affected you?
Well, it's tough. I mean, we're not as badly affected as a lot of people, a lot of the arable farmers, because we don't have too much land. We have more sites, but it's still a big discussion. My dad's 95. We've made no tax planning for this, so we're planning. We're going to have to sell some assets and do something to fund the tax.
As a direct result of what Rachel Reeves has done?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a ridiculous situation. It wasn't thought out, and by their own admission, they were working on the wrong data set. They weren't looking at farmers as such. It was all they were including every holding in the country, which was, you know, anyone with a donkey and 4 chickens. You know, well, they're not going to be affected. I get that, but the arable farmer that's got 400 or 500 acres, and that farmer's been in the family for 3, 4, 5, 6 generations more, they will have to sell land to pay the tax bill. And of course, if you sell land, you're going to make the farm even more inefficient because you're spreading the cost of the machinery over fewer acres. It's ridiculous. Anyway, I mean, it's up to them.
I mean, there are 10 million
farmers will sell.
There are 10 million people in this country who live rurally, and I mean, it's really interesting talking to farmers. I'm not saying that no farmer is going to vote Labour, but I'd be really interested to hear from any farmer or anyone in a farming family in this country that says, do you know what, that's a great idea, well done Labour, we're going to vote for you, because there's so much opposition to this, and it's kind of weirdly not party political. It's not as if it's coming from Reform UK or from the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats or anybody who opposes Labour. It's just coming from many people who, you know, may say, I don't have a political bone in my body, but I care about farming.
Oh, and that's absolutely right. We produce the food for the nation. And, you know, who shouldn't pay tax? Everyone should pay tax. But the problem with farming is the asset value is so high and the returns on that asset are so low, they will never.
It's the classic asset rich but cash poor, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's the classic asset rich but cash poor kind of idea, isn't it?
100%. They might be worth millions, but they're generating a few £1,000s to live off a year off the land.
So
you just can't generate the cash to pay the tax.
So do you think that Rachel Reeves is going to take any notice of this report by Baroness Batters? Should she?
Well, I think that's where it does get political, because they don't want to be seen to be making a U-turn, do they? You know, a policy is a policy, and I think it is. If common sense would dictate, then yes, she would stop it, because she's had the report and everyone tells her and everyone shows her that it was the wrong thing to do. But I think it's now a political hot potato, and that they don't want to be seen to be making a U-turn.
And to continue the food metaphors, it's like your turkeys voting for Christmas, isn't it?
That's exactly right. If they had the choice, they wouldn't vote for Christmas, that is for sure.
Certainly wouldn't. Is it a busy time of the year for you?
Yes, it is. And of course, we've got avian influenza, which is, we're getting sleepless nights at the moment because there's millions, hundreds of thousands of turkeys have now been lost because of avian influenza. So,
yes. How many turkeys do you have?
We grow 62,000.
62,000? Wow.
Yeah, we've got 2 more days of processing left.
Right.
And then they'll be in a fridge. But it's, you know, the past 2-3 weeks have been very unpleasant in terms of getting sleep.
I'm sure it's been very busy. Listen, thanks for talking to us, Paul. I appreciate that. That's Paul Kelly. He's a turkey farmer. His farm has been in the family for 52 years. I want to hear a voice note from Alison on Nigel Farage. Loads of people in touch about this. This is what Alison has to say.
Hello, Peter. This is Alison from South Wales. I just don't understand this thing about throwing all this mud at Nigel. Nigel is one person. We are the electorate. And it seems that the government don't seem to understand that we're the ones that they should be afraid of, not Nigel. Anyway, great show. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alison. Appreciate that. John in Sutton says, give me Farage over the useless establishment Starmer any day. Max in Warwickshire says, hi, Peter. I don't care what Nigel Farage may or may not have said or done at 13. He was a child and legally or morally is not held accountable. I'm interested in now and the future. Go reform, says Max. Cliff in Berkshire says, it strikes me that the left are using similar tactics against reforms Nigel Farage as they did against President Trump. It says Cliff, yeah, I wonder, Cliff, if you think he's responding in much the same way and whether that'll be an effective strategy. I'm actually going to keep that message on my screen because our next guest is James Heal from The Spectator. He is the sort of soothsayer of Reform UK. He knows Reform UK inside out, and I'll ask him about that specific point, Cliff, so thank you for it. Thomas in Glasgow says, to all the stupid left-wingers and establishment, all you're succeeding in doing is making Nigel and Reform stronger. Every time you try to defame them, and with all that free publicity, it will be welcome to show you that you are running scared. Mick says, what Farage said as a 13-year-old boy had no effect on the public, but the BBC and ITV put out racist content which had a massive effect. Farage has nothing to apologise for, but the politically biased BBC must be taken off air, says Mick. And Sally says, on DBS checks, these checks for disclosure and borrowing service, criminal record checks essentially, do foreign care workers who look after the personal care of our relatives have these checks, or are they just waved through? Well, Sally, I think they do have the checks. I'm sure one of our viewers and listeners will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure there's no one working in the care sector looking after vulnerable old people who don't, but the question is, can you actually trace it? If someone has come here from a foreign country and let's say there are, you know, thousands of people who, there's a very high turnover of people in the care system who are care workers, are you getting all the information about them? Certainly, look, there are people in the care system who work very, very hard from foreign countries, some of whom looked after my grandmother before she died and did a fantastic job in doing so and cared for her very, very, very diligently. But I think every family wants to know, are those people here legally? Do they have a criminal record? Are they not doing the job that they shouldn't be doing? I think it's a very, very good point from Sally, so thank you for that. We'll talk more about Nigel Farage after the break and this row over his election expenses and the other ways that various people are trying to smear him. The Anyone But Nigel campaign, I think, is kicking off. It is certainly something we'll be talking about in the next hour here on Talk, so stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It is Peter Cardwell here with Talk Drive. Loads to discuss, including the relentless attacks on Nigel Farage. First, it was what he said as a 13-year-old schoolboy. Now it's what he may or may not have spent as a candidate in the election in 2024. We'll talk to the criminologist of Reform UK, James Healy, the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, next here on Talk. We'll get your views on that. Plenty of views coming in, 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about right-wingers branded a danger to children as well. Jamie Michaels from South Wales was in court about some comments he made about migrants, found not guilty after 17 minutes. Jury said absolutely not, no case to answer here, off you go. Then he was told he cannot and is not allowed to coach his child, his daughter's football team. This is a local football club that desperately needs coaches. The only reason appears to be this safeguarding concern about his views on migrants, which you would imagine have absolutely nothing to do with coaching little girls football. And he, of course, people raise their eyebrows and say, hold on, what's the safeguarding concern here? He's done absolutely nothing wrong, and that's been proven by a court, by a jury. Also, taxpayers, you and me, facing £1 billion bill as the Home Office signs its most lucrative migrant-centred deal ever. We'll talk as well this hour about Labour wanting jobless youths to work in pubs and restaurants to cut the massive benefits bill. That is a plan that Labour has. Interestingly, one of our viewers and listeners has just sent me a message about the rateable value of pubs. Pubs have been absolutely hammered in the last few years by lots and lots of different ways. The COVID lockdowns, the rise in the minimum wage, national insurance contributions from employers as well. We'll talk to Michael Kill about all of that. Also, Prince Harry winning a government review into his protection, and West Midlands Police, speaking of police, a senior police officer giving incorrect information to Parliament. It's an absolute scandal. We're going to talk about that. That's about the Maccabi Tel Aviv football match and the threat that was perceived to be from those fans. So much to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air. You know me, as much as I can, I will get as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes on the air, because this is my show, but it's your show too. 0344 499 1000. That's the number for calls. For voice notes less than a minute, please. You can also send me WhatsApp text messages on that number. You can text me in the traditional way, 87222. You can send me a voice note, as I say. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss here on Talk Drive. I just want to talk about this story now about Nigel Farage under attack once again. This is from a former councillor, a former Essex councillor. He did serve as a Reform UK councillor. He is going to be interviewed by Essex Police over claims Nigel Farage broke spending rules ahead of the last general election. So many of our viewers and listeners saying, for goodness sake, why is Nigel Farage being attacked so much? Well, the motivations in a lot of our viewers and listeners' opinions seem to be clear. It's because he looks like the next Prime Minister. But has he done anything wrong here? Has he spent more money than he was allowed to? Well, James Healy is Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. We'll talk to him in a second. But first of all, I just want to play a little clip of what the Reform UK Deputy Leader, Richard Tice, told Jeremy this morning on this.
Well, it's becoming topical, isn't it, frankly? I mean, 2 weeks ago, it was this twaddle about what he may or may not have said 49 years ago in a completely different era. Last week, they were short news and they tried to rehash the same story on BBC, and they got right slapped down for double standards and hypocrisy. And now they're trying something else, seems to me. I mean, this story, just a couple of things around it. First of all, this is by a disgruntled former councillor who was expelled from the Reform Party for allegedly inappropriate sexual behaviour back in the summer. And surprise, he's now making all sorts of allegations. Well, that's a surprise.
Should say that Richard Everett, who's the councillor in question, denies any allegation against him in regard to inappropriate behaviour. Happy to make that clear. James Heal is with us now, Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator and Criminologist of Reform UK. James, I just want to give you a sense of what our viewers and listeners are saying here. I think it's very important. Gary says, we have a Labour government who's about to take away my right to trial by jury and cancel local and mayoral elections because they were terrified of the outcome if they went ahead. Seriously, remind me again why I shouldn't vote for Nigel Farage. And just one more, if I might. Paul from Hartlepool, who said, next week's news headlines will include items such as Nigel Farage was given detention in 1971 in year 9 and that he was rude to a dinner lady who would not eat his greens at junior school. The left is becoming isolated, obscene and economical with the truth. They are unable to put forward any sensible policies whatsoever. That is the sentiment of our viewers and listeners. Those are typical messages that are coming in today. In regard to what Nigel Farage is accused of here, can you just take us through it and what we know?
Yeah, so this is about someone who was involved in Nigel Farage's election campaign last year. You remember, of course, Peter, that he changed his mind about standing very short notice in late May. The election was early June. And these are allegations about whether spending rules were met, whether they were properly declared. They involve different things involving Nigel Farage's campaign, including a supposed reform-themed bar and an armoured Land Rover. And according to this gentleman, the incorrect films were filled out. There was not actually the correct details on that. He's now got all that evidence together, handed it to the police. And Essex Police this morning came out and said that they are going to interview Nigel Farage about those campaign claims. And, obviously Reform there are saying that this person is someone with an axe to grind, a grievance. There'll be questions, of course, about whether the sort of timeline has been met on this, because there's obviously a fixed period where you have to sort of raise allegations about spending misconduct, etc. But we'll wait to see what will happen. I think in terms of the audience reactions, as you say, those who are already Reform fans, I don't think it's going to change their opinion. The danger, of course, is that it then leads to a lot of legal issues, etc., and also might put off waivers and also mobilise people against it. But we'll wait to see these allegations.
In terms of how he's dealing with it, a very interesting analysis there, James. In terms of how Farage is dealing with it, Cliff in Berkshire, I read this out before the news actually, but I'm going to read it out again actually and put it to you, James. Cliff in Berkshire says, it strikes me that the left are using similar tactics against Nigel Farage as they did against President Trump. I wonder, given how Farage is responding, whether you see that as kind of Trump-esque and whether it'll have the same successful effect as Trump had.
So I think that, you've got to remember, first of all, of course, is that Nigel Farage has been in the electoral game much longer than Donald Trump. And I think if you speak to people like Nigel Farage, people around him, they've always felt as though the game was sort of rigged against them. And I imagine, although I haven't spoken to anyone from Reform about this, that he's exactly thinking of 10 years ago, Peter, where you'll remember as well, the South Thanet election and the general election of 2015. And it subsequently came out with a huge amount of Tory overspending on it. And actually, of course, was there a by-election? No, there wasn't. And it was all sort of, it sort of swept away in a sort of sense. And I think that he'll probably be feeling quite hard done by on this, because the Tories, of course, have used all sorts of tactics against him for years. The key thing, of course, electoral law is very complicated, as your friend Mark Crick will know. He's done lots of stories about this over the years. But I think you've just got to come out there and say you're going to fight it and you've got nothing to declare.
Absolutely correct. Dawn says, hi Peter, you would think Nigel Farage had been sentenced to 2 years in prison, or forgot to register a property to rent out, or beat up a constituent, or took free clothes. Dawn, that's a very, very witty and well put message, so thank you for it. I just want to talk to you, James, about a couple of other stories that are around, including the story about Jamie Michaels, I should say. He spoke to Ian Collins earlier on. Jamie is a former Royal Marine, and he was told that he couldn't coach his daughter's football team anymore. This is a team that needs a coach. It in fact was going to collapse and was going to not be disbanded because they couldn't get coaches because of a court case against him where he slagged off migrants. He was found not guilty by a jury after 17 minutes. This is what he said to Ian Collins a little bit earlier on this afternoon.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as you know, what's been brought up recently with David Lammy trying to scrap the jury trials. I mean, I could have been looking at a lot different situation that I'm in right now. I could have been sat in a jail if I was put in front of a kind of a leftist judge. And the first two judges that dealt with my case, I feel that they were kind of leaning to the left. And if it was them dealing with it, then I could have been in a different situation. And so to be talking about taking jury trials away is very, very scary and concerning.
I'm sure the judges in those cases would argue they're completely impartial. It's interesting, James, that this is something that keeps coming up time and time again. I mean, Jamie Michael is an Iraq war veteran, and this child protection concern was made against him. And of course, when you say child protection concerns, people jump to all sorts of completely incorrect conclusions about Jimmy Michael as well. I mean, he's done nothing wrong, but because someone says, oh, hold on, oh, you might be influencing these children and telling them to hate migrants, when actually he was found not guilty by a jury. And what's that got to do with coaching football anyway? Lots of concern about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And these review boards, Peter, were introduced after the Ian Huntley murders, the Soho murders about 20 years or so ago. They clearly were not intended for this. And I think if you've got to put the context of Jamie Michael's comments as well, which were speaking after the horrific Southport attacks last year. And so as a result of that, he's now potentially almost lost everything. So I do think there are going to be questions about the sort of reach of these powers, about these boards, how accountable are they? And also a really good point that Jamie Michaels was making there, which is that there is such a difference, isn't there, between judges and juries. And, you know, it used to be said about our Prime Minister that he was never very good in front of a jury, but he could always convince a judge. And I think that sometimes it does take a jury to get these cases. And of course, it was dismissed in 17 minutes. And I think that does show the idiocy of this case. And it's very good on him that he's had his name cleared.
You're absolutely right, James. James, you, Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogrund are the three best young journalists in the country as far as I'm concerned. Patrick has a piece today in the Times about a Labour group, Labour Together, that backed Starmer canvassing the party on leadership candidates. Just talk us through this and where Starmer sits and whether the vultures are circling in regard to him in your view.
Yeah, so Labour Together was the group that really gets Keir Starmer elected as leader of the Labour Party in 2020. It was set up, it canvassed lots of different members, it gave the data to Keir Starmer's now Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, which enabled him to pitch it just right. He understood what the Labour members wanted. So now 5 years on, we now have this survey that went out at the weekend to about 8 different candidates, people like Angela Rayner, people like Wes Streeting, and other people sort of like the Darren Jones, asking who would win, who would be better in a head-to-head contest, who do they like, what were the kind of things they wanted to see. And it all comes at a time of maximum political peril for the Prime Minister entering those May local elections. And it's significant because it does suggest that actually people are preparing for life after Keir. As soon as you start whispering about the potential vulnerability to Prime Minister, authority begets a dying king. And the authority is bleeding out of Keir Starmer right now at a rate of knots.
Has Starmer created some of this himself? I mean, he said, of course, that he didn't want all these people to be briefing against Wes Streeting and other people a few weeks ago. But given the soundings that you've been taking, the many, many dozens of people you speak to every week in Westminster, has Starmer and the people around him actually some case to answer for some of this? I mean, he's doing really badly and Labour are at 14% in one poll, so clearly there's going to be some speculation about whether he'll hang on. First of all, has he created this? And secondly, do you think he'll hang on much beyond the local elections, or is he safe for 18 months, as one of my guests said yesterday?
I think that certainly the biggest charge against Keir Starmer is that lack of planning and vision. And so you've got some of the kind of original sins there before the election, which were almost do nothing, be nothing, say nothing, and just have a Bing vase approach. And actually what we've now found is that exposure in power. So I think there was a failure to prepare for government and a failure to kind of make the kind of big choices necessary. And we've seen really this year, Peter, that Starmer sometimes has tilted right under strangers, tilted left with the benefits cap. So I do think that is against him. I think that Starmer himself can't understand politics, but he himself, as people like Tom Baldwin, his biographer, have noted, sometimes says, I've got Morgan for that. Morgan being his chief of staff, Morgan McSweeney. So I think that he has to kind of contract that out. And of course, it's then the question about whether advisors are doing things in the Prime Minister's name that he wants them or even is willing to know about. In terms of his viability, political survivability for Keir Starmer, I think that it's going to be very difficult if he comes third in both Wales and Scotland in May. And I have to say, you look at all the kind of signs, I don't know where salvation will come from. I don't think he is necessarily going to be on the brink right now. He's still only 18 months ago since he won an election. But my goodness, I can't exactly see where the great sort of bolt of the blue is going to come from. All the things look really bad from where I'm sitting, and the economy is just sort of grinding on, trickling on 1%. So I think it's going to be a very difficult year for the Prime Minister. And that's the key question in British politics 2026. Will Keir Starmer survive?
James, final question, and probably the most important one I'll ask you today. Are you in a kitchen?
No. I'm in the office.
A bathroom?
Politics office. No, spectator.
It looks as if you're in a kitchen. Are you sure you're not in a kitchen?
I promise you, we're not in a kitchen, and we've got sort of the door and the laptop there, and you might be able to hear a fridge which is where we have the all-important store of Diet Cokes in this office, which I know you'll appreciate.
Yes, if you could bring me one over before the end of the programme, that would be very, very much appreciated.
Will do.
Thank you, James Heal there, who is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Conor is in Warwickshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. I think you work on a farm, Conor. You're a farmer yourself. What do you make of these changes and indeed this report that has been done for Labour, by Labour, which says, guess what, inheritance tax on farmers is going to be devastating?
Hi, Peter. Oh,
hi there.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I'm a son of a family farm from Lincolnshire, and this inheritance it will ruin us. Just to go through the average numbers of stuff. I mean, the average farm in the UK is about 270 acres, and the average price of land is about 12,000. For the decent arable land, which our farm is. And you're looking at 3,240,000, which then 1 million of that is the measly threshold, or 3 million for married couples, and it's just totally unthought of how Labour they've just not thought it through at all. I mean, our farm is slightly larger than that, where ours is at 310 acres, and we're going to be looking at a tax bill of the 20% if applied to us of 544,000.
That's a heck of a lot of money. Is there no way, Conor, within your family that you could change the deeds, change the ownership of it, move it on a generation? Would that not help in some way?
The only thing that we've been advised to do is because it's my father and my grandfather that currently farm it. If my grandfather passed away, I mean, he's 83, and he's still working the farm today, and if he was to drop dead, my father would be lumped with an over £500,000 tax bill.
Yes.
And it's just, I mean, how are we meant to pay that?
Is there something you could do to prevent it if you change the ownership, for example, if your grandfather gave it to your father, or both of them give it to you, for example?
So if they passed it on to Dad, we'd have to wait 7 years. That's the only one. And then Grandpa would have to stay alive for 7 years. I mean, I saw something the other day. There was a farmer who was literally thinking about killing himself just to avoid this. I mean, that's the desperation that farmers are in.
Absolutely outrageous. Conor, listen, thanks for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate you giving me a ring on this. It affects so many people, and there are so many people who like Conor and like Conor's family, they're just trying to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, and so many different industries, so many different parts of our economy, it's just not working anymore. Another one of the nighttime industries, the restaurants, the bars, the clubs, many people who own those or run them, trying to make an honest living as well. And actually, I'm going to talk about this in a second with Michael Kill from the Nighttime Industries Association, because Labour wants jobless youths to work in pubs and restaurants to cut the massive benefits bill. But actually, can those pubs and clubs and restaurants actually afford to continue? And actually, a viewer has sent me, a guy called Spike in Wales, has very kindly sent me something from one of his local pubs, which has, he said, one of our local pubs has just posted this on their Facebook page. This is the new business rates from April. They said there's no way they can survive. What is the Labour Party doing? And this is the rateable value of the pub. So at the moment, the rateable value is £13,500. A lot of money, but the pub can pay it. And then the rateable value from the 1st of April next year is £33,750, so nearly 3 times as much. Lots to discuss in all of this, including the government's new plan. Michael Kill will be with us, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about it as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So there's lots of criticism of the Labour government saying that no one who is in the cabinet has any experience of ever running a business. Many of them have worked in businesses, but none of them have run one. Most of them are public sector people or people who've worked in charities, non-governmental organisations, think tanks, all those kind of things. So do they have experience of the real world? And can they actually solve the problems that are in our society, especially in the economy? Well, we just heard from Conor before the break there about how difficult it is to be a farmer, especially with the inheritance tax plan that Labour's own internal report says won't work and won't help. Well, the nighttime industries are something I feel really strongly about. These are restaurants, bars and clubs that have been absolutely hammered in the last few years by all sorts of things, including the fact that there were the lockdowns. That is something that hammered them to a huge degree. There was Eat Out to help out, but that didn't help. It helped to some degree, but it didn't help as much as was needed, certainly. There are national insurance contributions, meaning that it's more difficult to hire people, especially in industries where there's a high turnover of people or people who might be working part-time. The minimum wage has gone up. That's good for people on the minimum wage, but it's bad for employers because it means that their outgoings are higher. The price of food, for example, has gone up, as have lots of other things like business rates. Michael Kill knows all about it. He is Chief Executive of the Nighttime Industries Association. We'll talk to him now. Michael, good evening to you.
Good evening.
What the government now wants to do is use pubs and bars to cut the massive number of young people on benefits at a time when many hospitality businesses are on the verge of collapse. Michael, I've literally just in the last half an hour got a screenshot from a Facebook post of a pub in Wales. This is from a listener I trust completely, a guy called Spike in South Wales, to the extent that he has my number actually, and he says these are the new business rates from April. This is his local boozer. Before now, well at the moment, April 2023 to present, rateable value £13,500, now £33,750. This was a shocker to me, but to you, it's the reality of what your members are doing. Will this government plan help these industries at all?
No. In simple terms. I mean, look, we were already suffering from operating costs that are 30 to 40% more expensive since 2020. From the autumn budget that they had last year, we sat in a position where the NIC for employers went up, or the threshold went down, but obviously the costs went up. We've now just gone through a budget where the business rates was sold to us as a new lower multiplier, but long term. But the reality is the devaluation of it has absolutely crippled businesses. So when we sit here and we talk about an £800 million investment into employment of young people, when we're the biggest employer of 18 to 13, we've just literally had to shed thousands of jobs because we can't afford it. It's just ridiculous. I cannot explain how ridiculous it feels to be sat here talking about this with sensible people, with a business head that recognise 100,000 jobs have been lost. We're going to now pay to get them back into work, when if we just taxed fairly, we'd have them back in work anyway. So the reality is the way that this government has modelled things is wrong. We can clearly see it. People are frustrated and angry. And now we're seeing them invest into something which they already had if they just considered at ground level the impacts of these increased taxation positions, both in the previous budget and the budget that we've just seen.
You must feel you're banging your head against a brick wall, because what appears to me to be the case from what you've said and what I've read and understand about this, talking to other people in the industry as well, is that these rising costs mean you've had to shed jobs because you can't afford to employ these people. Many pubs are closing, for example. There are many restaurants under pressure as well. It's a high-risk business, sometimes with small margins as well. And now the government's saying, right, well, we're going to put taxpayers' money to create work in a kind of make work programme. I would love the young people who don't have jobs to have jobs, but is this just a fundamental misunderstanding of how your industry works?
I think without a doubt, as you'd suggested, just having people who understand business, having someone who've actually pulled a pint would be a starter for 10. Someone asked me a while back, what do you want to see from a politician that you're back? And I said, someone who goes out after midnight and understands the journey of the worker and the customer and the security guard that stands on that front door. So the reality is, in real simple terms, is you cannot subsidise people into jobs that do not exist. And they do not exist not because people are sat there and they haven't the will to want to go out. The reality is we can't afford it. We've shed thousands of jobs here because the taxation is so onerous, we've had to streamline what we do. So this, in many terms, is just a ridiculously timed position, a ridiculously timed sort of narrative that they're presenting, and something that the industry are hugely frustrated with and angered over, particularly as it comes out today. And we've only just recently seen the budget come out, which has absolutely crippled many people.
The government says that the money includes funding for training and work experience for 350,000 people, young people, I should say, on a universal credit. If they get that work experience, if they get that training, it's not going to mean there's a job at the end of it, is there? In fact, it's worse than that. It's almost a waste of time.
Well, it is. If the jobs don't exist, the reality is we're putting a lot of pressure on pub owners, landlords. They're having to pick up shifts. We've got people who are on annual pay, salaried, that are having to pick up shifts to make do so that we can get by. We're streamlining so much just to effectively survive. And 7 out of 10 businesses are either barely breaking even or losing money. So where they're seeing these jobs come at the end of these work experiences is just a fallacy. It's surreal. So for us as an industry, the government need to talk to people who understand our industry at the front line, at the coalface. And at the moment, those conversations are happening in many ways, and there's lots of data that's passing over, but the reality of standing on a door or standing behind a bar is just not projecting itself on some of the policies that are coming out, particularly from the Treasury.
When was the last time the Treasury, the business department had you in and said, Michael, do you know what, come in, tell us what it's like, we're formulating policy, we're thinking about what we're doing here, give us your experience?
Well, we do meet very regularly and we share data regularly. This is what is so frustrating for us as an industry. The amount of case studies, the amount of data that is when we produce a quarterly report, not just based on business position through CGA Nielsen, but we also do a lot around consumer reporting. So we do a quarterly tracking report that gives some very clear understanding of exactly how many businesses are around, where the challenges are, the fact that we've seen a 13% drop in late night economy revenue, the fact that we know that businesses like craft beer bars, theme bars, cocktail bars are doing better than most. So we've got the intelligence, it's being presented, it's just being dismissed and ignored. And I believe wholeheartedly these days that there is this systematic sort of closing down on, particularly on late nights economy, which has these challenges around safety and transport that they just cannot fulfill in terms of infrastructure. So it is economic, many of the issues that we face. SMEs are in trouble because they're the ones that are very hand to mouth, and that's 70% of our industry. But there are non-fiscal issues that we face around transport, safety, licensing that they're trying to deal with, but we're still not at a place effectively where it's making a difference.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Michael Kill there from the Nighttime Industries Association. Got some breaking news now on Talk on Afghan asylum seekers. Jan Jahanseb and Isar Nisal, who are both 17, have been sentenced at Warwick Crown Court to youth detention terms of 10 years and 8 months and 9 years and 10 months respectively for the rape of a teenage girl. So that is 2 Afghan asylum seekers who are both 17, sentenced to youth detention terms, 10 years and 8 months for one of them, 9 years and 10 months of them for another one for the rape of a teenage girl. Absolutely disgraceful, and yet another example of how there are people coming into this country. We don't know who they are, we don't know where they're from, we don't know what their criminal record is, we don't know what their intentions are, and sadly, very, very sadly and tragically, this young woman this girl has been raped by these 2 17-year-olds. Absolutely horrendous. May they rot in prison. I want to talk about another aspect of justice, and that's Jamie Michael, who spoke to Ian Collins a little bit earlier on. All he wanted to do was teach his young daughter how to play football, and her friends as well. This was a team that really needed a coach. This is what happened instead. He was accused of saying something online, not particularly nice thing, but he was accused of hate speech. That didn't happen. He wasn't convicted of it, I should say. A jury spent just 17 minutes throwing out the case against him, with huge expense to the taxpayer. Of course, Jamie spoke to Ian Collins a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as you know, what's been brought up recently with David Lammy trying to scrap the jury trials. I mean, I could have been looking at a lot different situation that I'm in right now. I could have been sat in a jail if I was put in front of a leftist judge. And the first 2 judges that dealt with my case, I feel that they were kind of leaning to the left, and if it was them dealing with it, then I could have been in a different situation. And so, to be talking about taking jury trials away is very, very scary and concerning.
This is the whole aspect of right-wingers branded a danger to children. He was accused of inciting racial hatred by describing migrants as scumbags and psychopaths. That was thrown out 17 minutes. A jury took to decide that was nonsense. He threw that out, and now he's been told that he is a danger to children. I mean, he's not. What's that got to do with children? It's nothing to do with children or whether you can coach football. It's ridiculous. Nick is in London, and I think we'd probably agree with Jamie Michael, Nick, that we need jury trials, because often juries come to a conclusion that judges do not necessarily. Nick, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, exactly, Peter. You've stolen my thunder.
Sorry about that.
But sorry, a shame about that. But, that shows exactly why jury trials are so important. 17 minutes. I mean, for heaven's sake, the CPS should hang their heads in shame. And there's a similar thing with Lucy Connolly, and Ricky Jones. They both said the same thing, essentially, something outrageous and nasty and ghastly and likely to offend or inflame. In one case, the establishment heard it effectively. Lucy Connolly was sent down for 13 months. The other case, Ricky Jones, a jury heard it and not guilty.
Although he pleaded not guilty, and Lucy Connolly pleaded guilty at one point, or accepted some of the charges against her. So it's slightly different. But on the wider issue, Nick, of the fact that he's not allowed to teach a few schoolgirls how to play football, which he's very well qualified to do, and the fact that so many people with right-wing views are being branded a danger to children, I think that's pretty sinister.
Yes, it is. Sue them. He should sue them.
He is suing them for 25 grand for breaching his human rights. He says it makes no sense. It just seems to me they want to punish me because of my opinions, because my views don't align with theirs.
I know, and I hope there's a funding for him to go and do it. He should sue the backside of them, because this is absolutely outrageous.
Okay, Nick, thanks.
Absolutely outrageous.
Thanks for your thoughts on that. That's Nick in London there. And thank you to Alan, who says the biggest electoral fraud of the last general election was Labour not doing all the things they said they would do, but doing all the things they said they wouldn't do. Why can't we have a police investigation into that, says Alan. Plenty to discuss about politics, about the direction this country is going in. But also the royal family. We're going to talk about Prince Harry winning a government review into his demand for armed cops when he visits the UK. Could it pave the way for a reunion between the King and his estranged grandchildren? Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rosie has been in touch on Twitter and says, no one in the cabinet remembers how reliant we were on farmers in the 2 world wars. As war is always on the horizon, can I suggest they think on? Thanks to Dan and Kent as well. He says, evening Peter, I seriously believe this Labour government will delay the general election. I don't know how, but I can just sense it, Cardi P. If that happens, it will almost definitely cause civil unrest. Well, certainly we've seen the postponement of quite a number of elections for varying reasons, and certainly that's something a lot of people, including Dan, are concerned about. Timothy in Barnsley in South Yorkshire says freedom of speech is getting more suppressed in this country. With all due respect to Keir Starmer and his party, he would not look out of place with his policies and views in North Korea. Great show, says Timothy. Timothy, thank you. We're not quite at North Korean levels just yet, but there are many, many concerns, certainly, and if you share them, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I want to talk about the royal family now, because Prince Harry has won a Home Office review of the decision to strip him of 24-hour armed police protection on visits to the UK. This is a potential U-turn, could pave the way for a reunion between the King and his grandchildren, Archie, who's 6, and Lilibet, who's 4, who live in the United States. The position of Prince Harry is that his family isn't safe when he comes here without that police protection. Let's speak to Rupert Bell, who's Talk's royal correspondent. Just bring us up to date on this, Rupert.
Well, the situation is he seems to have got the Home Office have now decided to review. Now, we know that he's been going for some time and going to High Court and saying that he is a special case, and that as a member of the royal family, whether he's working or not, he deserves the full protection for him and his family. And that is cited as one of the many reasons why he hasn't come back to this country with his family, because he doesn't feel there is the security around him when he is here to protect them. Now, this might be reviewed, and of course this might be controversial, because it could be taxpayers' money that will be giving him the protection when he is here. Now, it might mean now that he also could go and reunite with his family if he brings his children over. But I think, again, it does throw into question, why is he so obsessed that he thinks the security in this country, yes, he would have some level of protection, and they've always said that they review him by case, but when he goes to places like Nigeria, South America and other places which might on the face of it not have the same level of security. What is causing him so much anxiety? But he says, I should have it. I'm a member of the royal family. I don't think, Peter, anyone's saying that he shouldn't have security, because whether he's working royal or not, I just think it's going to be the level of protection, that him believing that he is a special case above and beyond what might be deemed as practical sort of security when he comes to this country. And I think that's the big problem for many people. And in the public opinion's eyes, I'm not sure they want his visits to be heavily funded by the taxpayer.
And previously he called the fact that he wasn't given this protection, as he put it, a good old-fashioned establishment stitch-up. I just wonder, if he does bring his family here, if he does receive this police protection, how likely you think it is that actually there could be a reunion between the King and his grandchildren, because Harry has been here on a number of occasions and not seen his father.
Well, no, yes, he comes in and maybe only sees them for half an hour or so. At the moment, I don't think they're busting a gut for a reunion, because they feel it will just end up on some TV show in the States. And, you know, again, he's been sort of mocking, you know, by appearing on Stephen Colbert, although bizarrely, he has just been speaking at the British American Council occasion in Santa Monica, which you feel is a sort of, you know, slightly sort of promoting British interests. So there is a balancing act, but of course he is a sort of rent-a-quote at the moment. But to come back to this country, I can't see it happening in terms of a relationship with his family. But it might mean when he comes back that, again, he will say, I will get the level of protection that my status is needing. But so far he's been back to this country, there hasn't been a problem. Not that it wouldn't look at and review each return. And that, I think, is the thing that is probably the thing that's sort of causing the friction. But as saying it's an establishment stitch-up, I think he does occasionally feel that he is the most persecuted member of the royal family.
Well, indeed. Rupert, thank you. That's Rupert Bell there, Talk's royal correspondent. Let's take a call now from Paul, who's in Newport. Paul, I understand you run a small business yourself, and what we were talking about earlier perhaps struck a chord with you. You're very welcome to the programme, Paul. What would you like to say?
It's a pleasure to be here, Peter. So the chap there who sort of said his business rates have gone up, you know, I think he was on a farm or something, and you were talking about sort of the nighttime economy.
Yeah, it was actually something else. We're talking two different issues. One about the farms a bit earlier, and inheritance tax, but also about a viewer, Spike in Wales, who had sent me the information about his local pub. Let me just find this again and get the facts here, because this was about his local pub. The rates that they will be paying, or will be asked to pay anyway, are huge. So at the moment it's £13,500, a lot of money for any business. But after the 1st of April 2026, £33,750. I mean, nearly 3 times as much, Paul.
Well, mine are going from 23,000 a year to 45,000 a year.
That's crazy.
Okay? But the thing people need to focus on, and this is where the MPs and all the sort of ministers have done nothing in their lives, right? So that 22,000, 23,000, that has to come from profit.
Yep.
Now, for me to make...
You've been taxed on that already, yes.
Right, but to make an extra £23,000, I've got to increase my turnover by 134,000. Because I don't make 50% profit. I mean, most businesses these days, if you get 10%, you're doing well. Okay. So if we say, okay, then initially, so I've got to somehow or other boost my turnover by this huge number, and then you say, hang on, I had to let someone go about 4 or 5 months ago because I just can't afford to employ people. And then you say, well, let's look at it from a different angle. Well, that extra £23,000 a year, that's half of my profit. That's half my profit. So I'm now in a stage where I say, I'll tell you what, I'll shut the place down, I'll lay everyone off, and I may as well push Tesco trolleys around the park at 25 grand a year, which is a national minimum rate. It's absolutely crazy. I cannot, and I don't understand why this government and the ministers can't see that everything starts with creating small businesses. And we employ
they don't seem to understand. They don't seem to understand basic capitalism. Can you just give me what sort of sector are you in, Paul, and how many people do you employ?
There's me and 5 others. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we're a bespoke bespoke manufacturing. So we
okay.
do
So
everything
you are absolutely 100% the typical business that is the backbone of the economy. Most businesses in this country, small businesses, employ 7 people or fewer than that number. You are exactly in that category. You're exactly the kind of person who the government should be trying to say, right, how can we help Paul create as much wealth as possible, increase his turnover, increase his profit, then he'll pay more tax, then the government will have, because he'll have these increased profits, then the government will have more money. Instead, the thought that is crossing your mind right now is, can I actually afford to do this?
Well, the question is, you're absolutely right, Peter. But you boil it down to the fact is, do I want to run around here, okay, 13, 14 hours a day, 7 hours on a Saturday morning, and walk away with less than the average wage? Why would I want to do that? I'll become what's called a busy fool. I'm no busy fool. I've managed a business for many, many years. The problem is that it's now becoming so difficult just to make a crust. Just to make a basic living, when every time they put the basic wage, I'll have no issue with that, provided they understand how it's got to be paid for. But you're now saying that for many, many small businesses like this one, the minute you say, well, actually, you're going to give me such bills, such taxes, such caveats just to start the business up, well, I'll earn less than a guy working in McDonald's. No disrespect to people.
And there's nothing wrong with working in McDonald's, but the point you make is that you've been working for years and years and years. You're skilled. You've got a bespoke business, which is manufacturing. That is something that should command a higher salary, and you, as the head of that business, should be making some sort of money out of this. And actually, we've got this scheme now by the government saying we're putting 800 million quid into giving people work experience and training for jobs that don't exist.
But it won't work anyway, because people like me, I daren't take people on, Peter. I just daren't do it. The problem we have, and I've been down this road, and it's very, very painful. I take someone on, within a few months, with a short period of time, they start saying mental health, this, that, and the other. You have to go through. I'm a member of the Federation of Small Businesses, and I encourage everyone to be that. Because if you try and remove people from your business, I mean, the last person I had to let go, I hadn't seen them for 6 months. Because they just kept saying they were poorly. But you can't just sort of say, I'm sorry, because of your attendance, I'm going to have to let you go. You'll be taken to court. The average payout, if you don't follow the rules, okay, and the Labour brought in all sorts of rules about employment. If you go wrong, the average payout is £20,000. So the person
ridiculous.
Takes to the court is £20,000. I haven't got £20,000.
Paul, you paint a really depressing picture of how many challenges there are for people like Paul, who's working his socks off and has for many years to try to build a business, one where he's employing a few other people, exactly the kind of business that's 99% of businesses in this country are small businesses like Paul's, employing 7 or fewer people. It's just outrageous. The government does not get it. It just doesn't get it. Paul, thanks for your call. Really, really learned a lot from that, and please ring me anytime. We're going to talk in just a second about another person who doesn't get it, the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, who gave incorrect information, lied to Parliament about this very controversial game between Aston Villa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. We'll get all the detail on that in just a second. Stay with us.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Mark in York, who says these people attacking Farage over comments as a child are the same ones who think Shamima Begum was not responsible for her actions as a teenager. It's typical sheer hypocrisy. And Brian says they're attacking and trying to smear Nigel as they can't compete with him politically. That's Brian in Bournemouth there. I want to talk about a story that is really concerning. A senior West Midlands police chief apologising to the Jewish community in Birmingham for telling MPs they backed a ban on the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans for the Aston Villa match. They did not. Parliament was given incorrect information. This was a lie, straightforwardly, from the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, Mike O'Hara. He's now writing to Parliament to correct the record. Let's speak to Rabbi Jonathan Romain about this, the broadcaster and social campaigner. Jonathan, this is just disgraceful.
Yes, it's an astonishing story. By the way, I should tell you that I'm speaking as not just as a rabbi, but also someone who's a police chaplain, and therefore I'm sympathetic to the police and their needs as well. But really, this has gone viral, this story, and the questions are being asked in Parliament about a football match, which, you know, is unheard of. And there's two real issues. Firstly, what was said, and also what should have happened. I mean, what was said, well, it's a moving story, because first of all, the police claimed that it was the ban was due to sort of local opposition, in other words, political pressure from this sort of very sort of shadowy, what was it called, safety advisory group.
That's right.
Yeah, and then the story changed and said, no, it's exclusively, and they used that word, due to the violence of the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans, which was based apparently on a false report. So it really smacks of a lot of confusion, some backpedaling going on, and it may be that if there was if there was a genuine mistake, then maybe. But if there was deliberate misleading of Parliament, then I think somebody will have to definitely...
I wonder if there's just willful ignorance as well, because from what apparently happened, he just didn't seem to be across all the detail on this. And the question I've been asking time and time and time again is, where does the threat come from? Is it the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, or is it the Islamists who would do them harm? Because they said, and they told, and this was public after the match, that it was apparently the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, but a lot of the information that was given to Parliament and that West Midlands Police were acting on was false information. There was a meeting that there were no minutes taken from. There was a conflation of different bits of information. It's absolutely disgraceful. And the fact is that, yes, Maccabi Tel Aviv have a few, or probably more than a few, thugs and hooligans. They could have been removed if there was proper intelligence and the police did their job properly. But instead they capitulated to the mob.
Yeah, you're right on both counts. Firstly, the Dutch authorities themselves said that the reports about Maccabi fans being unduly violent was not true. In fact, they were the victims at the Ajax match. And secondly, what happened in the event, there were no Israeli fans at all, and yet the police had to put on the largest show of force ever. 700 police were there, and there were several arrests. Why? Well, because of exactly that local mob violence. And, the solution was so simple. simple, and I'm speaking now as a football fan who goes regularly to my own local team. What they should have done is limited the number of away fans, kept them separate, kept them perhaps in the stadium until the home fans had gone, put them straight onto the coaches, and done what they would normally do with any high-profile match. And especially as the government intervened to say, I think it was Lisa Nandy, actually, the Culture and Sports Secretary, who said the government would give extra resources to Aston Villa police to help them. So it really was a tremendous cock-up, and it does smack of giving in to local threats. And that's the really sort of worrying thing, because frankly, Tel Aviv Maccabi are no more representative of Israeli government policy on Gaza than Aston Villa represent government policy on the two-child cap benefit.
Or someone in a sequins dress singing a silly song in Eurovision. But the fact is that a lot of people just hate Israel and just hate Jews, Jonathan.
Yeah, and unfortunately the two conflate, and it's not just a matter of unfortunate or sad words. We know it then leads to violence, as we saw in Manchester. And we hope Manchester is a one-off, but it's this sort of giving in to violence, rather than coming out strongly and condemning it and say, no, this is football and we are going to protect our streets, and we're going to allow our Jewish fans to attend as much as any other fans, and we're going to allow away fans to come from whatever country. And so the police, I think, ducked it.
Jonathan, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's Rabbi Jonathan Romain there, broadcaster, social campaigner, police chaplain as well. I didn't know that, actually. So thank you to him for his contribution. We're going to talk to the MP at the centre of all of this, Nick Timothy, who's been fighting this, who's been asking questions in Parliament about this today. He will be joining us a little bit later on in the programme. That's Nick Timothy of the Conservatives. Lots to discuss in the next hour, including the attacks on Nigel Farage too. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell here today and tomorrow. Loads to discuss, including Nigel Farage. There's attacks that just keep coming. Also, the father who wants to train young girls how to play football, exactly the kind of wholesome activity they should be involved in. Well, he's told he can't because he criticised migrants. Yes, really. We'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about the fact that the government is under pressure, as is West Midlands Police, after false information was given to Parliament about the who, what, when, why and how of the Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa match. The MP at the heart of all that, he's been asking very, very good questions in Parliament this afternoon. Nick Timothy will be with us this hour as well. Lots of reaction as well from you on Nigel Farage, and Tobias Elwood will speak to us as well about Starmer hosting Zelensky for Ukraine talks in London. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Lots of people getting in touch as well about the pressure small businesses are under. We heard from one small business owner there in Newport, Paul in Newport, who was talking to us a little bit earlier on. We heard from the Nighttime Industries Association. Thank you to Natasha in Switzerland, who's listening at the moment, says, so depressing how they're not properly supporting small businesses. That's one of the glues that keeps a country solvent and well socially as well. Labour are totally useless in all of this. On Nigel Farage as well, Jane says, so much airtime in Nigel Farage, pretty the same amount of time isn't given to the Labour government. They get away with scandal after scandal. If this was a Tory government, we would be on the campaign trail for the election. Amanda says, I shudder to think how far the left will go in their fear of losing power to Nigel Farage. And Paul says, tomorrow's Farage story, I believe, is a fact. When he was at school, he didn't buy his own clothes. He got someone else to pay for them. I believe it was his parents, says Paul, tongue firmly in cheek. Well, let's speak to Philip Kisley, who's Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, in just a second. We'll ask him about all of this. Good evening to you, Philip.
Hi, Peter. It's great to see you again.
Great to have you on the programme. I just want to play a little clip now before we get your reaction, Philip, to this Farage stuff from Richard Tice, who's the deputy leader of Reform UK. He spoke to Jeremy this morning about these allegations about Nigel Farage spending too much money. There are limits on what you can spend. There's so many attacks on Nigel Farage. This is what Richard Tice had to say about it. Oh, no, we don't have that clip. Apologies for that. But, Philip, I think we know that Richard Tice very, very annoyed about this, as are many people. Philip, what do you make of this and the fact that there's so many different attacks on Nigel Farage? Now, there may well be some truth in this. The police say they're going to interview the person who's made these allegations. Richard Tice made the point that it is a disgruntled former Reform UK councillor. I think we can look at this now.
First of all, this is by a disgruntled former councillor who was expelled from the Reform Party for allegedly inappropriate sexual behaviour back in the summer. And surprise, surprise, he's now making all sorts of allegations. Well, that's a surprise. Secondly, there is what they call a one-year statute of limitations to this particular issue. Well, obviously, we're well past a year, unless it seems that the Crown Prosecution Service could determine that it might be required. Well, that would be quite interesting. This is the same Crown Prosecution Service that determined recently it didn't have enough evidence in the China spy case, despite 18 months previously determining that it did have enough evidence for the China spy case. I would suggest to the Crown Prosecution Service, focus on what really matters, which is those people who are trying to spy and do harm to our country, as opposed to people like Nigel who are frankly trying to save the country.
Philip, what's your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, well, it seems to me that Nigel Farage is a real threat to the establishment here, and they will try anything to bring him down. I was just trying to get a sense of the person who's made these allegations. Richard just framed it there in terms of there's an alleged sexual misconduct and this, that, and the other.
Which he denies. Which he
denies. As I say, it's alleged.
Yeah.
But so he started in UKIP, and then he left UKIP, and then he was in the Conservatives, and he left the Conservatives, and then he was in Reform. So it's a really complicated past, let's say, and I'm just finding it difficult to know where this person comes from. Why didn't he make the allegations before? You know, there's all sorts of different questions you can ask here, and you have to think that I come back to this same thing, which is, you know, maybe Nigel's just a big threat here, and anybody will use anything against him. It's not as though the government are actually competing with Reform at the moment. They're not. They're so far behind them. Reform clear water in front of everybody else. The government are actually competing with the Green Party at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is the first. That's unprecedented in my life.
And speaking of people who've been in lots of different parties, Zach Polanski was originally a Liberal Democrat. He is in some polls doing better than the Labour government, hovering around 14% for Labour, and sometimes the Green Party are around 16 or 17%, depending on where they are. And it is interesting, isn't it, Philip, that we have these different types of parties that are competing against one another for the left and for the right, broadly, very broadly speaking, if those definitions even exist anymore. You've got Reform and the Green Party, which are, I think, the two most interesting political parties that are there. What do you think of that? And also, what do you think of what Nigel Farage does in response to these kind of allegations, the things he allegedly said as a 13-year-old, which he denies, and also these allegations around spending limits and so on? Some argue that some of our viewers and listeners actually arguing that he's responding in the way that sometimes that Donald Trump does, and maybe that's actually a good thing.
I think it is a good thing. I like it when he's angry and when he really pushes back on this stuff. If people are accusing him of saying things when he was 13, that's how desperate they are. There is a realignment going on. There's a political realignment going on here. There is something seismic happening. It's populism. Now, elements of populism can be quite good. I openly support the Reform Party. I want change. I want our borders taken care of. I want our children to be safe. I want women to be safe on the streets. I want taxes to come down. I don't want to be paying for illegal immigrants. So I think that is good. I think the rise of the Green Party, this lunatic Islamo-communist party under this person who isn't even his real name, for God's sake. So then I think that, or at least this is name that he hadn't been using before, then I think that is worrying. And I think this kind of sectarian politics, actually, that the Green Party represents, they don't seem to represent green issues. They seem to represent Islamist issues. They seem to represent.
Yeah, it's very rare for Zach Polanski to ever actually mention the environment, which is a bit weird. Their deputy leader definitely has many questions to answer about what he has said about Jews in the past.
Yeah, and that's what really worries me. There is a tide of anti-Semitism here, which we've known about from the left and the lunatic fringe of the left for a long time. And it's just interesting that the Green Party are pushing are really ahead of the charge on this. And your party, as we saw with their conference last week, they were just coming out and saying openly that they were mad. That's fine. That's perfectly okay as far as I'm concerned. But I think the important thing here, to get back to the point, is the idea that Reform are surging ahead, and it feels to me that they can say what they want about Nigel Farage. I think he's more than well enough equipped to really push back on that, and he really, let's not hold people responsible for what they said when they were 13. I probably said some outrageous stuff when I was 13 myself, and so did you. It shouldn't impact on your career now, and it shouldn't impact on his ability to run the country, which he might well be doing in 2 or 3 years' time.
Let's talk about freedom of speech, because earlier on, Ian Collins, my colleague, interviewed Jamie Michael, who is a father who wants to teach his daughter and her friends how to play football in a local football team. He was arrested and charged with inciting racial hatred. A jury found him not guilty after just 17 minutes. But now he's a safeguarding concern, apparently. Let's just hear what he said to Ian Collins a little bit earlier on in the programme.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as you know, what's been brought up recently with David Lammy trying to scrap the jury trials. I mean, I could have been looking at a lot different situation than I'm in right now. I could have been sat in a jail if I was put in front of a kind of a leftist judge. And the first two judges that dealt with my case, I feel that they were kind of leaning to the left, and if it was them dealing with it, then I could have been in a different situation. And so to be talking about taking jury trials away is very, very scary and concerning.
Thank you to everybody who's contacted us about the echoing problem with some of our clips. Hopefully it's now sorted out, but if it isn't, we're on the case. Don't worry about that. But certainly what I heard clearly there anyway, I hope everybody else did too, from Jimmy Michael is very concerning. I wonder what you think, Philip.
Yeah, I think cancel culture is a shape-shifting beast, Peter, isn't it? And it takes many forms, and this is just the latest form. It is taking people, right-leaning people, and saying that they're a threat to children, essentially. I'll tell you, actually, Peter, what is a threat to children. An obsession with identitarian politics and an obsession with gender, because immediately safeguarding goes out of the window. An obsession with being seen to be anti-racist, because safeguarding goes out of the window. Theories, concepts, putting those before everything else, putting those before people. That's what the left constantly does.
Well, John on Twitter actually just absolutely agrees with you, Philip. He says, what about left-wing teachers teaching our children? Surely that is a form of safeguarding issue.
It is, and all of these people who are screaming about safeguarding issues on the right are from the left. They tend to be fairly radical, and they tend to want open borders. And I was just looking through stories before I came on here, and I'm just reading it now. 2 Afghan asylum seekers raped a 15-year-old girl in a park. That was a story that came out.
They've just been sentenced actually, and we did do that breaking news a little bit earlier on to about I think one got 9 years, one got 10 years. I mean, it's just absolutely disgraceful and horrendous that is happening. People coming into our country, we just don't know where they're from, what their intentions are, or whether they have a criminal record or not, or whether they're likely to commit criminal acts.
Yeah, and you know, these vexatious claims for this chap that we're talking about here. You know, he's not in. All he wants he wants kind of the borders to be relatively secure, from what I can gather. You know, he's certainly not. You know, he doesn't want children to be trans. He's not the kind of person. For example, a primary school in Edinburgh a few years ago, a primary school, Peter, had a wear a skirt to school day in which little boys were encouraged to wear skirts.
He called some migrants scumbags and psychopaths in a 12-minute video posted on Facebook following the murders of 3 children in Southport, and he was accused of inciting racial hatred. The jury acquitted him after 17 minutes. I mean, some migrants are scumbags. Some migrants are psychopaths. That is factual information.
And you know, that might be intemperate language to use in public, but so what? You know, at the end of the day, so what? He is not a problem or a threat to children in any way, shape, or form. And to suggest that he is devastating to him. You know, those of us who've been on the receiving end of political cancellation, as I have, in the in the education sector, know full well the kind of damage that this can do to people. And it's not just that as a broader issue, but specifically when someone says there is a safeguarding issue with you in regard to little girls and you're a man, that is a whole other level. That is a whole other level of of the conclusions people will unfairly in this case jump to. That actually puts you in physical danger. Okay, if you are seen to be a threat to children, then there's a very good argument you are in physical danger there.
Okay.
So hopefully, just to finish the point, the people who have made these vexatious claims will have to pay for them in some way.
Well, I hope so. There is actually a legal case about all of this actually, and there is a fund. The Free Speech Union is campaigning with this man, with Jimmy Michael, and Hilary, thank you for your tweet. Hilary says, Peter, in response to your last caller, there's a fund set up by the Free Speech Union to help Jimmy Michael. If you go to the Free Speech Union website, anyone can donate. So thank you, Philip Kisley, for your thoughts on all of that. He's Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Thank you to Tad as well in Cambridge, who says the true signposts among the political classes remain pretty constant in their opinions. The one that I find incredible are the weathercocks who change their mind to suit the prevailing political wind. Goodness knows there have been so many of them. Labour, the Lib Dems and a sizable chunk of the Tory party are full of such people, says Tad. Jan says you only get flack when you are over the target, talking about Farage. Betty says they're deliberately trying to crash the country and property prices so vulture funds can buy it all up and rent it back to the state. David in the Cotswolds says Jimmy Michael served his country as a Royal Marine Commando and it is about time his country started to serve him. It is about time this government starts serving the people instead of cutting them off at the knees and giving all our money to our feckless and funding these illegal immigrants, says David in the Cotswolds. Nick says, you know it, I know it, they won't rot in jail, talking about the two people, the asylum seekers who have been convicted of raping a girl in a park. They'll probably have 3 meals a day, a TV, a phone, drugs, and probably much more. Prison as a holiday camp, and that's why nobody fears going there. Ernie says if the Crown Prosecution Service did their job properly and didn't charge people with stupid offences that shouldn't even be considered for court, there wouldn't be any backlog. Helen in Yorkshire regarding Jimmy Michael. A caller was asking about funding for his appeal. Free Speech Union has opened a crowdfunding page for anyone who wishes to donate. No membership required. Yep, thank you for that, and thank you to the tweeter who gave me that information as well. Lance Foreman, for it is he, is listening as well. The very, very successful businessman and former MEP as well. He says, great call from Paul earlier on. That was about half an hour ago. Paul, the small businessman in manufacturing, who spoke about all the various difficulties he has had. Great call from Paul, says Lance on Twitter. Trying to run a business successfully with this government is challenging. They don't have a clue and don't understand the impact of their decisions, as they've never run a business. That is someone who is a very successful businessman, says Lance Foreman. And Lance, if you want to send me any salmon for Christmas, feel free. You know the address. Joking. Another person has been in touch, and that is Craig in Bridlington, who says, Peter, great show as always. Thank you, Craig. Whilst I am not a supporter of Nigel Farage or reform, it increasingly feels as though Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs are disproportionately fixated on him. Their constant commentary, criticism and reactive messaging seem to elevate Farage's profile far more than his political position or influence would merit on its own. Instead of challenging reform's ideas through substantive debate or presenting stronger policy alternatives, Labour and the Lib Dems often appear caught up in responding to every statement Farage makes. In some ways, it looks as though both parties are allowing Farage to dictate parts of the national conversation, perhaps because he is a convenient antagonist, or perhaps taking aim at him is an easier political strategy than addressing deeper political issues. Very interesting one there from Craig. Great messages today. Thank you to everybody, and we'll take more calls, of course, between now and 7 o'clock. I'm also going to speak to Tobias Elwood in a second about Starmer hosting Zelensky for those Ukraine talks in London. We'll speak to Nick Timothy, the MP, as well, who is hopping mad, and rightly so, about West Midlands Police giving Parliament incorrect information about this Maccabi Tel Aviv match with Aston Villa. Lots more to come in just a second here on Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Bob says, don't forget Rishi Sunak didn't support SMEs during COVID furlough. So that's Bob in Surrey there. Bessie says that Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands has to go. We'll be talking to the MP at the heart of all of that in a few minutes' time. Nick Timothy of the Conservatives. Rue says, what about the left-wing teachers teaching our children? There's quite a lot coming into the building. And Mick in Wallington as well says the hated Labour Party called Tories scum and the nasty party. Labour are simply the evil party. And Stephen Bromsgrove says, if the local safeguarding board considered Jamie such a threat, why have they not taken his daughter into care? Hypocrites and politically motivated, says Steve. Let's talk now about President Zelensky. He has been meeting European leaders today here in London. Ukraine's allies are planning the response to an ongoing US push for Kyiv to accept concessions in peace talks. We've had Macron, the President of France, here. We've also had the German Chancellor as well, Friedrich Merz, and Tobias Ellwood is with us too, the former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, former Defence Minister. Tobias, how close are we to a deal, do you think? We've heard Keith Kellogg, the envoy to Ukraine, talking about that it's within touching distance. What do you think?
Well, good evening. I don't think we're anywhere near a deal because there's a fundamental difference between America's approach to Ukraine and Russia and Europe's. We see Russia as an existential threat to European security, whereas America simply wants to do a deal and then walk away. And I should say it's been a difficult year when we look back at Trump in charge of America. Europe has shown huge patience with him, going to almost embarrassing lengths to stroke his ego, praise his leadership, to flatter him indeed, in the hope of avoiding any tariffs, but also of keeping him engaged with Europe and against Russia. And the evidence was already there that strategy was not working. You recall how Trump treated President Zelensky in the Oval Office back in February, I think it was. You have the halting of weapons deliveries, the cutting off of intelligence sharing, and then bringing Putin in from the cold with that Alaska summit. And in my view, it's been a long time to end this subservience, this tiptoeing around Trump, fearing he might walk away. But the release, I have to say, of Trump's national security strategy this week makes it official. America is embarking on a seismic ideological shift in global engagement. It's more isolationist, less engaged in defending our global order, and there's a deliberate disengagement from Europe while seeking to improve relations with Russia, Europe's adversary. So this is where we now sit. The US is choosing to dial back. Russia is now back in favor with America, and America has to, Europe has to pick up the pieces, and that's why there's these discussions taking place across Europe today.
Do you then think that Trump is taking us for granted, or is it an active series of measures against us? And what should we do? Do we just have to go it alone? Perhaps look to other NATO allies, a more European-based approach? What's your thought on this? I know you've written for The Telegraph about this today, Tobias.
I have. We shouldn't pretend any further. And it saddens me, as somebody who was born in the United States, I'm a dual national, to see where America is going. But it's official. It's in that document. But as I stressed, the evidence has been there beforehand. Trump's view of the world is that it's in flux. It's in a sense of chaos. And he's willing to do deals with anybody if it's in America's interest. The idea that you have old alliances, friendships of the past, that's now out the window. And it is sad, and it's also geopolitically naive, because Europe, distracted, involved in some form of war, whether it's gray zone or otherwise, means that we can't help America should they call upon our support in years to come. And to stress, we're already in a gray zone war with Russia. You've talked about it on your own program. The undersea cables threatens our territorial integrity by Russian maritime capabilities. We have cyber attacks, coercion, disinformation. This is happening on a regular basis today. And if Russia defeats Ukraine or declares victory in Ukraine, that's only going to increase.
Just bring it back to today. What is there any point to Zelensky being in London today, do you think, if we're so far away from any form of deal? Was there a point to that trip, or is he simply shoring up allies?
No, it's 100%. We now need to take stock of the new world that we face. Global order is crumbling. That's 2025. What we started off in post-1945, it simply ended this year. We're in a very different, very insecure environment. So it's absolutely right that Zelensky meets with our Prime Minister, with the German Chancellor and the French President to discuss what we can do to shore up our own security, to support Ukraine, to prevent Russia from advancing its own interests further west. Now America has decided to dial back.
Okay, Tobias, thank you very much. That's Tobias Elwood, former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, former Defence Minister himself. Thank you to Derek, who says the Labour Party destroyers want to bankrupt our country. The Labour Party hates the white working class. The Labour Party hates pensioners. The Labour Party hates British farmers. The Labour Party hates our fishermen. These Marxists are intent on wrecking everything. They're loonier than the last time, says Derek. And Dabby Rees in West Kirby in the World says, you have no idea how much pleasure it gives me when I hear about senior police officers being caught out lying. Well, we're going to talk about that in a second. I think it's Davy Rees rather than Dabby. Davy, I think there's perhaps a little error there, but certainly with this senior police officer, it's very, very serious what this police officer has told Parliament. He is an Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, and the intelligence, the reasons they had for banning Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters, those Israelis, from coming to support their team against Aston Villa in Birmingham. Huge story at the time. Now the truth is emerging, and part of the truth getting into the public domain is down to one man, Nick Timothy, who is a Conservative MP we're going to speak to next. He has been asking the policing minister many questions about this today in Parliament as part of an urgent question. He's giving his first interview after that to us here on Talk. We'll speak to him in just a second. You're going to want to hear this. You're going to want to hear how we were lied to. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including Ernie, who says, listen to your small business callers. Everything Liz Truss was trying to achieve was the answer, yet it was strangled at birth. Says Ernie, if it wasn't, the country might now live in a better place. We wouldn't have been saddled with a government who have people in vital areas of government who have no idea what they're doing. Ernie, I'm afraid I strongly disagree with you. I think Liz Truss was an absolutely disastrous Prime Minister. Kwasi Kwarteng was a dreadful Chancellor, probably the worst we've ever had, although Rachel Reeves gives him a run for his money, I think. But listen, on our programmes, and my programme, we disagree without being disagreeable. One person I absolutely disagree with, who I think should resign, is the West Midlands Police Assistant Chief Constable Mike O'Hara. He told the Select Committee, one of these committees in Parliament that scrutinises what's going on, the Home Affairs Select Committee, last week, that concerns were raised by the religious community, or Jewish religious community, over supporters of the Israeli football team travelling to the city. But hold on, they weren't. Well, there was an urgent question today in Parliament by Nick Timothy, a Conservative MP, asking the Policing Minister, Sarah Jones, a series of questions. Let's speak to Nick Timothy now, who's been leading the charge on this and keeping this in the public consciousness. Nick, Parliament was given incorrect information here. What do you think should happen now? Just outline this for us, because it is an absolute scandal after that match. Aston Villa, I know you're a supporter of the team yourself, in Birmingham when Maccabi Tel Aviv played them in the Europa League.
Well, hi, and thanks for having me on. I mean, to start at the beginning, when Villa drew Maccabi Tel Aviv, there was a campaign by Islamists in the local area and local politicians to stop the fixture going ahead at all. Now, the game went ahead, but the police advised the local council to ban the Israeli fans from coming, and they did so with intelligence information that has fallen apart. And the police were called to the Home Affairs Select Committee last week to justify that so-called intelligence. And actually the story has just unravelled even further. It all relates to information they say they got from the Dutch police about a match last year between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax that was played in Amsterdam. West Midlands police claimed that Israeli fans were connected to the Israeli Defence Forces, that they were going into Muslim areas and targeting civilians, that they threw people into the river, that it took 5,000 Dutch police to quell the violence. None of this is true. The Dutch police have said it's not true, and they haven't just said so on the record to the British media. They've said so to their own mayor, to their own media, to the Justice and Security Inspectorate in the Netherlands, and more. And every time West Midlands Police tries to justify what they've done, the story just unravels that little bit further.
And now Mike O'Hara, the Assistant Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, he is clarifying the record. I mean, either he had incorrect information in the first place, either he lied, willfully misrepresented what had happened, was given bad information and didn't check it. I mean, there's so many reasons that we should be really angry with the police in this case, and you're right to be angry and you're right to ask these questions, Nick, because we were not told the truth, and we knew we weren't being told the truth at the time. The police came out as well and said Maccabi Tel Aviv fans were the problem. Yes, there were some hooligans. Yes, there are, because in many large football clubs, in many small football clubs, that is the case. But if they'd been doing their job correctly, I would argue they could have looked into individual intelligence in regard to hooligans and got rid of those hooligans themselves and allowed other supporters to go there. I just wonder what you think Mike O'Hara should do now. Should he resign?
Well, I said in the House today that the police have had several weeks now to justify their actions and to provide us with the information we need to be reassured that that they haven't done the wrong thing. And over the course of that time period, they failed to justify what they've done. And so in my case, in my view, in order to justify sustained public confidence in the integrity of the police and in the justice system, I think the Chief Constable and probably the Assistant Chief Constable with him will need to resign.
Very, very interesting. I mean, it really is fascinating what the local Jewish community have been saying as well, saying that they got a briefing on this, but after the decision was made as well. So there's a conflation of the fact that they were informed to some degree, but that was presented as if they were consulted and asked their opinion before the decision was made. That just wasn't the case.
Yeah, and I think, O'Hara was given the opportunity, I think, 3 times to be clear about whether the local Jewish community had supported the decision to ban the fans, and he was clear at the select committee that that the Jewish community had been consulted and it did support the decision, and obviously that caused a lot of offence in the community, and O'Hara had to write to the community apologising. Of course, he said he'd been misunderstood and that he wasn't misrepresenting their position, but that seemed dubious in itself. But this is not the only thing. And I think sometimes when you see some of the commentary about this, certainly online, people say, well, it's just a football match. You're just concerned about the rights of some Israeli supporters in a momentary occasion. But actually, this gets to the heart of really important questions. Can we trust the police? With whose consent do they think they do their job in the country's second city?
And at what point as well do they say we're not giving in to the mob here? Because if they're saying they can't protect a few football fans, we live in a country where Rangers and Celtic can go to home and away matches. That wasn't the case for a few years, but it is now. If we're in a situation where they're saying we cannot protect these people, well, at what point do they say, well, do you know what, we can't protect Jews going to synagogue, for example? I should say that the West Midlands Police have said in answering these questions it was never the intention of Mike O'Hara to imply that there were members of the Jewish community who had explicitly expressed support for the exclusion of Maccabi fans. We are anticipating follow-up engagement from the Home Affairs Select Committee and will ensure this is clearly articulated as it has been with representatives of the Jewish community. But there are much wider questions here, Nick, and I do wonder whether there is an erosion of the fact that we have to protect our Jewish friends and neighbours, the fact that so much of what the police does appears to be to facilitate things like those pro-Palestinian protests, yet there are so many feelings, including this one, when it comes to protecting Jewish people.
Well, yeah, and I think if you look at fixtures at Villa Park over the last few years, Villa have played teams like Legia Warsaw, Bologna, more recently Young Boys of Bern in Switzerland, and those teams actually do have histories of hooliganism, and the games were allowed to go ahead. In fact, the game against Young Boys was classed only as a medium risk match, and you have to ask why the game against Maccabi Tel Aviv was treated differently, and it seems pretty clear to me it was treated differently because they're a team from Israel, and there was great controversy in Birmingham that a team from Israel should come to play at Villa Park at all. And instead of saying this is a test case, we're going to defend the rights of teams to come and play in accordance with the rules of the competition, that we're going to allow people to go about their business, that we're going to stand up for the rights of Jewish people to freely assemble in the country's second biggest city. The police didn't do any of those things. They decided to bow to the mob, and I think this is the real point. The decision was, I think, not taken in good faith, as Lord Mann, who's one of the key witnesses to all of this as the government's advisor on anti-Semitism and an expert in football hooliganism, has said. The facts appear to have been fitted in order to justify a decision that was already made. And they did that because they probably did fear public disorder, but they're not being honest about where that disorder comes from. Peace and order comes from.
Nick, just before you go, I wonder if I could ask you about another story that you've been commenting on today about ministers, in your view, that should consider withholding permanent residency for migrants who would draw more in welfare payments than they contribute. Can you just tell me your thinking about this, especially in light of the budget a couple of weeks ago?
Well, the government has said that it wants to review settlement rules, and it's made great play of the fact that it wants to be stricter so that people who come on time-limited visas to this country might face a harder process in order to be able to settle here long-term. One of the really obvious holes in what they've said is that in my view, if somebody's come here on a time-limited visa and they are low income and quite obviously in the long term going to be net recipients of public money, we shouldn't be giving them settlement at all. Whereas in the government's consultation, they've proposed requiring people to wait longer for 15 years rather than 5 or 10. But my view is there's no point in in drawing these things out. If people are going to be net recipients of public funds, then actually they're probably not the kind of people we want to stay in the country at all. And with the choices that the government's made in the budget by removing the two-child benefit cap, the research shows that there are particular nationalities, foreign-born families in this country who will benefit disproportionately from that policy change. So if you look at the numbers that lie behind the census, it's foreign-born families from countries like Pakistan and Nigeria and others who will gain. And it's another example of the government taxing people who are working hard for their living to redistribute to people who perhaps aren't.
Just finally, before you go, Nick, Nigel Farage is under a lot of pressure today. There may well be an inquiry by the Electoral Commission. I just wonder what you think from your own party's perspective. You're under a lot of pressure. You're doing badly in the polls. Many would say Kemi Badenoch is attempting anyway to turn that round. But would you be happy to go into some coalition with Reform UK?
I think all these conversations are premature. What we've seen in the last couple of months is Kemi really starting to cut through. I think the party conference made a big difference. I had people spontaneously applying to become members of my own local Conservative Party straight after that. And I think the response to the budget that she gave in Parliament was incredibly strong, and not just anecdotally in my own constituency, but if you look at the opinion poll data, it shows that actually that seems to have really cut through, and there has been some movement in the polls. So I'm looking forward to 2026 with some hope and some optimism, because I think it's going to be a year where we hold this government to account, but we also start to put some flesh on the bones in terms of our own plans for the future, and I find that very exciting.
OK, no doubt we'll talk again about those plans. Nick Timothy, thank you. Conservative MP there, he had that urgent question in Parliament today. Just want to play a voice note before the break from Tristan. Tristan's been in touch on Nigel Farage and that criticism that I was talking about with Nick Timothy there. This is what Tristan has to say.
Well, Peter, it's Tristan in Bedford. About this situation with Farage and them dragging up another, well, something that he's apparently done. The problem is the Labour have constantly lied. They've lied about so many other things. And the thing is, they don't receive any condemnation. There's no consequences for what actually happens. We can start from the Lord Ali gifts. Then we can go about the Morgan McSweeney donation scandal. There's so many I can list. I'll be here all day. Then they drag one thing up relating to Farage, and then suddenly it's like, oh my God, we can't keep having this situation where Labour just get away with everything, and then they try and bring it onto reform. It's quite simply one rule for one and one rule for another. There's no transparency at all. Whatever Labour do, they just get away with it all the time, and it just continues.
Very good points there, Tristan. Certainly we won't let Labour, or indeed any party, get away with it. We'll bring them all under scrutiny, and we will talk about Nigel Farage. Dave in London wants to talk about him in just a second. We'll do that after the break. In the meantime, let me read one message. This is from Francis in Sussex. He says, I totally disagree with you, Peter. Liz Truss had the right idea. The Bank of England pulled the plug on her. You should do your research. Francis, I would argue I did my research. I've read quite a lot about it. I reported on it at the time. I have an opinion that is based on facts, but of course you're entitled to your opinion as well, absolutely. And on my programme we disagree without being disagreeable. And Lizzie in Telford, I can't possibly read out your message, but I am delighted to receive it. Just as you're delighted to receive a certain book that I couldn't possibly mention that's on sale in all good bookshops. Stay with us here on Talk.
This is from the migrant camps in Dunkirk.
It's a lot deeper and darker.
The French police are complicit every step of the way.
And that was when I heard the gunfire. You need to get out of here quick. They do not care about human life. They are dangerous people.
For 2 weeks, talk was undercover in those camps. This is an absolute scandal.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
As promised, let's speak to Dave in London. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about Nigel Farage?
Hi, Peter. I know you're going to disagree with it when I'm finished what I'm about to say. I believe that we're just watching the Trump playbook play out again with Farage. We're going to have story after story planted. We're going to watch the media follow it. But I think having listened to Talk for a lot of today, I think Talk has fallen into this trap of the amount of time you're spending on it. If I was the Labour people behind the scenes, I would be rubbing my hands with glee saying, get another one, because Peter's going to talk about it for 40 minutes.
Isn't it a story, Dave?
Minutes. Ian's going to go on about it for 40 minutes and so on. It's just, I think you're doing their job for them, to be brutally honest.
So Dave, do you not think it's a story if someone alleges, someone who is on the inside of Nigel Farage's campaign, whether they hate him, whether there's a real breakdown in communications with him, do you not think it's a story that person alleging that he's overspent, which he might have done actually, that we shouldn't cover that?
Yes, I think it's a story. I think you should spend 10% of the time on it and the other 70 to 80% of the time on other stories that have been going on today that are Labour issues. But I'm saying that you're spending 40% of your time on it. Make it 10 is all I'm saying, because I'm starting to turn off. The story is he's being looked into by the police. End of story.
Well, he's actually not just yet. But my point would be, Dave, that we have got to scrutinise Nigel Farage in exactly the same way as we scrutinise every politician. We've got to ask these questions, and also actually a lot of callers, texters and tweeters have had your opinion or a similar opinion to you that actually this is a bit of a witch hunt against Nigel Farage, and I want to represent that as well.
I agree. I'm just saying the balance is completely... I think you interview... I'll give you a couple of examples. I think you had someone on... you had Jack on from The Sun, spent all the time with him on it. You had Isabel on, spent loads of time with her on it. Then you had another guy come on and spend the time with it. And then, in your last question to that Tory MP, I think it was, where your question was, will you look at a reform thing? You prefaced it with, Nigel, the election fraudster.
No, I'm not. Look, I want to be clear. I want to be clear, Dave. Dave, I want to keep us both on the right side of the law by what I'm about to say. There is no suggestion that Nigel Farage has broken the law, electoral law, or any other type of law. That'll just keep us both on the right side of the law. I'm not saying that for a second, but it is a story, and I think it's right to discuss it with those people. And you gave me a ring about it, and the majority of people who are contacting us today are actually thinking, do you know what, we need to discuss this because we need to see where these allegations are coming from and actually whether these attacks on Nigel Farage are actually justified or not.
I know, but what you've got to remember is it's not happening on the other side of the fence. anything Labour do, your mates, not your mates, Peston, Rigby and all of that lot, they're not going to hold anybody to account on the other side. So Reform are getting held to account on the left now and on the right. And it's just, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, it's a perfectly valid point, Dave.
Move on.
It's a perfectly valid point, Dave, and thank you for it. I appreciate it. And give me a ring anytime, Dave, because you always make good points, even if we don't entirely disagree, because in my programme, we disagree without being disagreeable. And again, to keep us on the right side of the law, I'm sure that both Robert Peston and Beth Rigby would say that they hold all sides to account. You may disagree with that, and that's okay, but I'm sure that's what they would say. Matt in Cheshire is on the line. Matt, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good evening, Peter.
Hiya.
Just a quick one about what the gentleman just said.
Go ahead.
These kind of allegations help Trump get more votes, not less.
Yeah.
And who sits on a story for 50 years when Nigel Farage has been on a politician for 30 years?
Yeah, well, it's a very good point. And I mean, I think there is a real worry here. And I've made this point in the programme before. I think there is a real anyone but Nigel kind of campaign that's starting at the moment. They will throw absolutely everything at him. And the thing that, you know, you can love or hate Nigel Farage, he is a survivor.
Yeah, I mean, he's been through all this a decade ago, 20 years ago. It's just utterly desperate and truly embarrassing, Peter.
Okay.
And I understand as a media sort of organisation, you have to cover it. But what I actually rang about was, has Zelensky replaced Larry the cat at Downing Street? Because
he's always there, isn't he?
Yeah, he's on the doorstep more than Larry the cat. And I'd much prefer to see the cat than Zelensky.
Me too. If only someone would write a book about Larry the cat and all the other political animals. If only someone would do that. But Matt, it's a very, very interesting point you make there. Larry actually photobombed a photo opportunity with Zelensky today. I don't know why Zelensky was here. I did ask Tobias Elwood that earlier on. And I'm just not sure what the point of Zelensky being here. I also think, I don't know if you agree with this, that this whole sort of narrative that Zelensky is Jesus and is absolutely perfect in every single way is clearly nonsense, given the many, many corruption allegations against people very close to him.
Yeah, I mean, totally agree. Starmer is using it to cover up his failings at home. He's parading around, filling his photo.
They love it, though. They love doing that, don't they? They love being the big I am internationally. Tony Blair did that as well, and it absolutely, they just neglect the domestic stuff, don't they?
Yeah, it just infuriates people. And the main thing is, as well, while he's basically saying Putin is evil, Zelensky is Jesus, Keir Starmer has arrested, or basically more people getting arrested in Britain for social media comments than they do in Russia.
I've seen that statistic, actually. It's a very, very concerning one. Matt, thank you for your thoughts this evening. Vernon in Staffordshire is our final caller of the day. Vernon, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Evening, Peter. Quite a simple one. If MPs have a criminal record, they shouldn't be MPs. They're custodians of the rule of law in this country. And it just doesn't sit comfortably at all.
Should it be public, do you think, if they have a...
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. Yeah, they shouldn't... At the end of the day, they're in a position of trust, Peter. I don't trust any politician, if I'm honest. I certainly don't trust the Labour Party. I didn't trust the Tory Party before that, and I'm a lifelong Tory, or I should say I was. But you simply cannot be an MP and have a criminal record. It's just not possible. It is, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, and that transparency should be there, shouldn't it? Because these people are running the country. Well, we've been told that this is an issue of their personal safety, and actually, I mean, if you look at James McMurdoch, for example, he had a criminal conviction, spent time in prison for assault. Reform UK didn't know that before he became an MP for them. It's just one example. There are many other examples as well. There are many other MPs from all sorts of different parties who've done terrible things and done things for which they have a criminal record, Vernon.
It's just a standard, Peter. It's a standard.
So they should all have to declare, do you think, when they're running, when their nominations go in and so on? Should say, for clarity, James McMurdoch isn't a Reform MP anymore.
At the end of the day, if you are wanting to be an MP, the rules are quite clear. If you have a criminal record, you can't even run.
Yeah.
And
okay.
if you are an MP and you get a criminal record, then instantly you get dismissed without a pension.
But haven't you paid your debt to society in some way, Vernon? I mean, if you, imagine.
No, Peter.
No?
Absolutely 100%, 1,000% no. We have a dishonest government that's in place at the moment. We need to bring things back to how day-to-day people live their lives.
Okay.
MP are law enforcers indirectly, Peter. You know, if we don't have proper people at the top, what does that say to everything else in life? I mean, as it happens, I think we are in a totalitarian state at this moment in time.
I don't think we're quite there yet, are we, Vernon? I hope we don't. I hope we never get there.
Yes, we are. Peter, you are a lovely man, but you know more than anybody where you are from, how things can get distorted.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's very, very simple. We are in a terrible state in this country, and I'm like probably most people,